Chapter 1. The crisp winter air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out of the car, snowflakes catching in my dark hair like tiny stars. I tilted my face up, letting the cold kiss my skin, and inhaled deeply. Pine, earth, something else. Something wild and electric that made my pulse quicken. Oakhaven. The name rolled through my mind like a forgotten song finding its melody again. Well, Liana Bean, here we are. Dad's voice cut through my reverie as he wrapped me in one of his bear hugs, his flannel shirt smelling of coffee and aftershave. Dad, you promised you'd stop calling me that once I got to college. I laughed, but I squeezed him back just as tightly. Never, David grinned, his breath forming white puffs in the cold air. You'll always be my little bean. Mom emerged from the passenger side, already surveying the ivy-covered dormitory with the critical eye of someone planning a military operation. The building looks solid. Good heating, I hope. These old structures can be drafty. Sarah's gaze softened as it landed on me. Don't forget to call us when you're settled, sweetie. We're just 15 minutes away now. I will, Mom. And seriously. My voice caught slightly. Thank you. For moving back here, for everything. I know it wasn't easy leaving Portland. Mom waved a dismissive hand, though her eyes grew misty. Nonsense. Your father's been talking about coming home to Oakhaven for years. Besides, this way I can still guilt you into Sunday dinners. Mom. Don't mom me. I've already found the perfect pie recipe to bribe you with. As my parents began the Herculean task of extracting my belongings from their overpacked car, I found myself drawn to the edge of the parking lot where ancient oaks formed a natural border with the wilderness beyond. The trees were bare, their branches etched against the gray sky like delicate ink drawings. But beneath the snow I could sense the pulse of life waiting for spring. Waiting. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down my spine. Those strange instincts were stirring again, the ones that made me notice things others missed, hear sounds that seemed to exist just beyond normal perception. I'd always attributed them to an overactive imagination, but here in Oakhaven they felt sharper, more insistent. Liana, you okay over there? Dad called, hefting a box marked books, heavy as rocks. Yeah, just admiring the view, I replied, forcing myself to turn away from the tree line. 3 hours later, my sterile dorm room had transformed into something resembling home. String lights cast a warm glow across band posters and bookshelves, while a small succulent garden lined my windowsill. I was adjusting a crooked picture frame when frantic knocking erupted from my door. The door burst open before I could answer. Liana, oh my God, you actually made it! Chloe Richardson exploded into the room like a hurricane of cotton candy pink hair and infectious energy. She launched herself at me, nearly toppling us both onto the unmade bed. Chloe, I laughed, steadying myself against my best friend's enthusiastic embrace. I told you I'd be here. I know, but I was having nightmares about you chickening out and staying in Portland. This place would be absolutely tragic without you. Chloe spun in a circle, taking in the transformed space. Look at this. You've been here for half a day, and your room already looks like a Pinterest board. Mine still looks like a tornado hit a craft store. That's because you packed 17 different nail polish colors but forgot sheets. Priorities, babe, priorities. A gentle knock interrupted our reunion. A tall, quiet boy with kind eyes and an apologetic smile peered around the doorframe. Sorry to interrupt, but Chloe mentioned her friend was moving in today. He stepped into the room, followed by another boy, this one lankier, with unruly brown hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. I'm Ben, and this is Liam. The infamous Aliana, Liam said, pushing his glasses up with one finger. Chloe's been talking about you nonstop since orientation. I was beginning to think you were a mythical creature. Just mostly mythical, I grinned, immediately warming to his dry humor. Liam's our resident history nerd, Chloe announced, collapsing onto my desk chair and spinning slowly. He knows more about this campus than the tour guides. Guilty as charged. Liam's eyes lit up with the particular intensity of someone about to share their favorite obsession. Did you know this building was constructed in 1847? The architect supposedly incorporated elements from medieval castle design, which is why the hallways feel like mazes. That explains why I got lost 3 times trying to find the bathroom, Ben muttered. And, Liam continued, warming to his subject, There are rumors about hidden passages beneath the old library, probably just urban legend, but the building schematics from the 1920s renovation show some interesting inconsistencies. As my new friends settled into easy conversation around me, I felt something tight in my chest loosen. This was what I'd hoped for. Connection. Belonging. The chance to be just a normal college freshman, worried about normal things like class schedules and cafeteria food. But even as I laughed at Ben's impression of our overly dramatic English professor, those other senses kept stirring. A scent that didn't belong, musky and wild, threading through the familiar smells of my room, a sound like distant thunder that seemed to vibrate in my bones, inaudible to my human friends. I found myself glancing toward the window, toward the darkening forest beyond the campus lights. Earth to Eliana, Chloe's voice snapped me back to the present. You're getting that look again. What look? The one where you look like you're listening to something the rest of us can't hear. You used to do it at camp too. Heat crept up my neck. Sorry, I guess I'm just tired. It's been a long day. No worries, Ben said kindly. Moving is exhausting. We should probably let you get some rest. But not before we make plans. Chloe bounced to her feet. Tomorrow's Saturday, which means no classes and yes, brunch. There's this amazing place downtown. The Rusty Spoon, Liam supplied. Best pancakes in 3 counties, assuming you can handle food that hasn't been processed to death. Meet us at 10? Ben asked. I nodded, grateful for the normalcy of it all. Sounds perfect. After they left, I stood at my window, looking out at the snow-dusted campus. Students hurried between buildings, their laughter and chatter carrying on the cold air. Everything looked peaceful, ordinary. So why did I feel like something was watching me from the shadows between the trees? Later that night, nestled under my familiar quilt, with the string lights casting dancing shadows on the ceiling, I tried to quiet my restless mind. The day had been perfect, better than I dared hope. So why couldn't I shake the feeling that I was missing something important? Sleep came gradually, but with it came the dreams. I was running through moonlit forest. The world exploded with scents and sounds. The sharp musk of fox, the sweet decay of fallen leaves, the metallic tang of something that might have been fear or might have been prey. My body moved with impossible grace and power, muscles bunching and releasing as I leapt over fallen logs and dodged between trees. It felt like coming home. I woke with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dawn light filtered through my curtains, and for a moment I could swear I tasted pine needles and winter air on my tongue. Just dreams, I told myself, pulling the covers higher. Chapter 2. The first day of classes dawned crisp and bright, yesterday's snow giving way to brilliant sunshine that made the campus sparkle like something from a fairy tale. I practically bounced out of bed, my backpack already packed and waiting by the door, a fresh notebook open to its first pristine page. Come on, Chloe, we're going to be late for Intro to Mythology, I called, already halfway into my jacket. Chloe emerged from the bathroom like a zombie, still wrestling with her unruly pink hair. All right, Miss Punctuality, but seriously, you are not ready for Professor Calloway. What do you mean? A mischievous grin spread across her face as she grabbed her phone. He's like a walking Greek god. All the girls in my psych class last semester were completely obsessed. She scrolled for a moment, then shoved the screen in my face. See? Professor Atlas Calloway. Tell me I'm wrong. I glanced at the faculty photo on the university website, expecting the usual awkward headshot of a middle-aged academic. Instead, I found myself staring at a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a classical sculpture. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and the most intense eyes I'd ever seen. As my gaze lingered on the image, something strange happened. A pull tightened in my chest, followed by a sudden hard thump of my heart. Warmth bloomed beneath my ribs, spreading outward like ripples on water. Okay, I managed, handing back the phone. You might be onto something. Right? Half the female student body audits his classes just to stare at him. The other half actually tries to learn about mythology, but let's be honest, the staring is the main draw. We navigated the bustling campus, weaving through crowds of students clutching coffee cups and course schedules. The air buzzed with nervous energy and new beginnings. When we finally located our lecture hall in the imposing stone building that housed the classics department, it was already packed. I managed to snag a seat near the back, Chloe sliding in beside me with a theatrical sigh of relief. Around us, conversations hummed, speculation about professors, complaints about early morning classes, the usual first-day chatter. But beneath it all, I felt that peculiar hum under my skin again, the same restless energy that had been building since I'd arrived in Oak Haven. Then he walked in. The effect was immediate and absolute. The room, which moments before had been a cacophony of whispers and shuffling papers, fell silent. Not the gradual quiet that usually settles over a classroom, but the sudden, breathless hush that follows a lightning strike. Professor Atlas Calloway commanded attention without saying a word. He moved with an innate grace that seemed almost otherworldly, each step deliberate and controlled. There was something wild beneath his polished exterior, a dangerous stillness that reminded me of a predator studying its territory. His dark hair showed subtle silver streaks at the temples, contrasting sharply with steel-gray eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the room. The expensive suit he wore did nothing to diminish the raw power that radiated from him like heat from a forge. I found myself leaning forward without realizing it, my pulse quickening. That strange awareness I'd been experiencing since arriving in Oak Haven suddenly intensified, as if someone had cranked up the volume on senses I didn't know I possessed. I could smell cedar and something deeper, wilder, like pine forests and winter storms. My skin prickled with electricity. What is wrong with me? Professor Calloway set his briefcase on the desk with practiced precision, then turned to face the class. When his gaze swept the room, I felt it like a physical touch. My breath caught as those steel-gray eyes moved across the rows of students, methodical and searching. The sensation was so intense, I had to resist the urge to duck down in my seat. Then his scan slowed. I felt the exact moment his attention locked onto me, even from 30 feet away. It was like being caught in a spotlight, sudden, exposing, inescapable. My heart hammered against my ribs as his gaze held mine for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. There was something in his expression I couldn't read, a flicker of surprise? Recognition? Recognition? Whatever it was made that electric awareness under my skin spike to an almost unbearable level. Finally, his gaze moved on, professional and controlled, but I remained frozen in my seat, shaken by the intensity of that brief connection. "Good morning," he said, his voice carrying easily through the large hall without need for amplification. There was something hypnotic about his tone, warm honey over sharp steel. "Welcome to Introduction to Mythology. I am Professor Calloway." He turned to write on the whiteboard, and I caught myself studying the way his shoulders moved beneath his jacket, the controlled power in every gesture. Around me, I could practically hear my female classmates holding their breath. "Mythology," he continued, turning back to face us, "is not simply a collection of quaint stories told around ancient fires. These narratives served as the foundation for entire civilizations, frameworks for understanding the natural world, human nature, and our place in the cosmic order." As he spoke, weaving tales of gods and monsters with scholarly precision, I found myself completely captivated, not just by his obvious attractiveness, though Chloe hadn't been exaggerating, but by something deeper. The way he moved, the cadence of his speech, even the way he held himself, all triggered that primal awareness humming beneath my skin. Several times throughout the lecture, I felt his attention return to me. Not obvious staring, but those brief, intense moments when his gaze would find mine across the room. Each time it sent a jolt through my system, like touching a live wire. I told myself I was imagining it, that he was just making eye contact with different students to keep them engaged, but the sensation was too specific, too focused to dismiss. "Take the werewolf legends found across multiple cultures," he was saying, and my attention snapped into sharp focus. From Norse berserkers to Native American skinwalkers, these stories speak to humanity's complex relationship with our animal nature, the duality of civilization and wildness that exists within us all. Again, I felt his gaze on me as he spoke those words, and this time I was certain it wasn't my imagination. His steel-gray eyes held mine with an intensity that made the rest of the room fade away. There was something searching in his expression, as if he was looking for a specific reaction. My pulse raced, and I had the strangest sensation that he was speaking directly to me, that somehow this lecture about ancient myths was actually about something much more immediate and personal. The moment stretched between us, electric and impossible to ignore, until a student in the front row raised her hand with a question. The spell broke, but I remained shaken, my notebook forgotten in my lap.
The moment I stepped into the lecture hall, I felt it, an unfamiliar wolf scent threading through the usual mix of coffee, anxiety, and cheap perfume that permeated college classrooms. It was faint but unmistakable, raw and unrefined, yet strangely compelling. My alpha instincts roared to life, every nerve ending suddenly alert. Someone has trespassed. My steel-gray eyes swept the room with predatory efficiency, searching for the source. Confusion warred with alarm in my mind. Who? And how had they entered my territory without my knowledge? In all my years protecting this area, no wolf had crossed into Oakhaven without my awareness. Then my gaze snagged on a young woman in the back row, and the scent trail led directly to her. Eliana Vance, according to my class roster. Her dark hair caught the morning light streaming through the tall windows, revealing hidden auburn highlights that seemed to shift and dance. When her amber-flecked eyes met mine, I felt a jolt of recognition, not the kind that comes from previous acquaintance, but something deeper, more primal. She was the source of the wolf scent, but that was impossible. Shapeshifters didn't just appear without training, without a pack, and I would have sensed if there was any pack in my territory. Her pupils dilated slightly, her breathing quickened, and I caught the sharp spike of adrenaline in her scent. I forced myself to begin the lecture, falling back on decades of academic routine while my mind raced. She was young, probably 19, with the fresh-faced innocence of a typical college freshman. But there was something in her eyes, an awareness that spoke of deeper currents. Throughout the lecture, I found myself drawn back to her again and again. Each time our eyes met, I felt that same electric jolt, and I could see her responding to it. The way she leaned forward in her seat, the flush that crept up her neck, the way her hand moved unconsciously to her throat as if she could feel her pulse racing. When I reached the section on shapeshifter mythology, I couldn't resist testing her reaction. I spoke of duality, of the thin line between civilization and wildness, watching her face for any flicker of recognition or understanding. Her response was immediate and intense. She went completely still, her breathing shallow, her eyes wide and fixed on mine. "What are you?" The question burned in my mind. As the class period drew to a close, I assigned reading from the textbook and dismissed the students. I watched as Eliana gathered her things, noting how her movements flowed like water. When she stood, she was taller than I'd expected, with an athlete's build beneath her casual clothes. She filed out with the rest of the students, but not before glancing back at me once more. Our eyes met across the emptying room, and I felt that electric connection snap taut between us again. Then she was gone, leaving me standing alone with more questions than answers. I had to investigate, had to understand what she was and why she'd appeared in my territory without warning. The logical part of my mind, the part that had kept me alive till now, urged caution. But my wolf was intrigued by the mystery, drawn to this strange creature who smelled of potential and untapped power. Whatever Eliana Vance was, she represented something I'd never encountered before. And despite every instinct screaming at me to be careful, I found myself already planning our next encounter.
Chapter 3. Each class with Professor Calloway made the hum beneath my skin grow louder. It was subtle at first, an itch I couldn't reach, a flicker of something restless threading through my thoughts, but it intensified every time I stepped into the lecture hall, thrumming through my veins like a second heartbeat, and always it centered around him. Atlas Calloway. Even thinking his name felt dangerous, like lighting a match too close to a fuse. He never looked directly at me for long, not enough to raise suspicion, but I felt it all the same, his gaze sharp as a scalpel and just as precise, cutting through the crowded room and pinning me in place. He never smiled, he never faltered, but whenever our eyes met, the air seemed to bend between us, charged and heavy like a storm about to break. I started sitting closer to the front. I told myself it was for better note-taking, but the truth buzzed under my skin. I wanted to be near him, needed to be. The wildness I'd always kept buried, the instincts I'd chalked up to imagination, came roaring to the surface in his presence. I noticed things I shouldn't have, the barely there scent of cedar and snow that clung to his coat, the way his pupils expanded just slightly when he glanced at me, how his movements were always too smooth, too quiet, like a predator that had learned to walk among prey. Sometimes I felt the urge to challenge him. I didn't know what that meant, only that my heart would pound with this restless need to rise when he spoke, to match that intensity, to test it. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. One afternoon, the lecture hall buzzed with post-class chatter. Chloe had already darted off to meet Ben and Liam, and I was lingering behind, stuffing my notebook into my bag when it happened. A stack of essays slipped from Professor Calloway's hands. Papers scattered like snowflakes across the floor, and before I even realized I was moving, I was kneeling beside him, scooping them up. My reflexes were wrong, too quick, too fluid. I reached for one of the essays at the same moment he did, and our fingers touched. A spark, real and sharp, jumped between us. I gasped, pulling back like I'd been burned. My heart lurched. His eyes snapped up to meet mine, steel gray and suddenly very, very human in their surprise. No mask, no professor's detachment. Just raw, unguarded intensity. Neither of us spoke. For a long second, the only sound was the slow rustle of the last few pages settling around us. Then he cleared his throat, the walls slamming back into place behind his eyes. "Thank you, Miss Vance," he said, voice even. I nodded, forcing myself to stand on shaky legs. "Of course." I fled the room before I could say something stupid, like ask what the hell that had been. Later, in the student union, I nursed a hot chocolate that had gone cold in my hands. My fingers still tingled where they'd brushed his. Behind me, a group of girls were whispering, "God, did you see his hands? Like, ugh!" What I wouldn't give to have him critique my thesis. Seriously, he's so intense. And those eyes? Like he could see things about you. Right? I feel like I'm confessing sins just by showing up to class. I rolled my eyes, but my stomach twisted. Not with jealousy, though maybe that too, but with something I didn't have a name for, something possessive. Primal. Chloe plopped down beside me, her pink braid bouncing. "Don't even deny it," she said, nudging me with her elbow. "You've got it bad." I blinked. "What?" She pointed her stirrer at me like a weapon. That dazed look, the dreamy sighing. "You're getting a crush on Professor Calloway." I scoffed. "You're delusional." She grinned. "No, you're in denial. It's okay, Liana. Half the campus is crushing on him. The other half's probably writing poetry about his jawline." "I am not," I started, but trailed off. Because she wasn't wrong, not completely. And that terrified me.
Her scent haunted me. Wild pine, cold wind, and something else, something new, untamed and unclaimed. The faintest trace of a wolf, barely there, but enough to unravel every thread of my composure. I could still feel the imprint of her touch on my skin. The essays had been an accident, or so I thought, until she moved faster than any human should have. Her reflexes were honed, precise. When our fingers met, it wasn't just static, and I hated how much I wanted more. The girl was dangerous in a way she didn't yet understand. She drew my gaze like gravity, pulled my thoughts off course. I found myself seeking her out in lectures, watching the subtle way her body shifted when she was restless, how her jaw tightened when she was concentrating. She didn't belong in Oak Haven. Not yet. Not untrained. Not unclaimed. I'd already dispatched scouts. None of the local packs had claimed her. No alpha had stepped forward. No territory dispute, which meant she was rogue, or worse, latent, unawakened. That possibility chilled me more than I cared to admit. If she was going through her first stirrings alone, without a pack, without a guide, she was vulnerable. To others, to herself, and to me. I was breaking every rule already, letting her into my orbit, letting myself watch her, want her. But I couldn't look away. She was raw potential, power untapped, a whisper of ancient bloodlines long thought extinct. There was no other explanation for why my wolf, usually so disciplined, was snarling beneath my skin every time I caught her scent. Every time I remembered the jolt of her touch. I leaned against the desk in my office, eyes fixed on her file. Eliana Vance, born in Portland, transferred to Oak Haven University for her first year. No recorded pack affiliation, no signs of inherited lineage, no local relatives. A mystery, but not for long. My wolf was pacing now, restless. She had no idea what she was, not yet, but she would soon. And when she did, I wasn't sure who she'd turn to or what she'd become.
Chapter 4. It started as a flimsy excuse, just a late paper, one I could have emailed, one that didn't truly need to be hand-delivered. But I'd needed to see him. Something about the week had felt off balance, like my inner compass kept spinning in circles, and the only thing that seemed to ground it was him. Professor Atlas Calloway. The name made my pulse thrum with a now familiar rhythm I didn't understand and didn't want to examine too closely. The hallway outside his office was hushed, the kind of silence that stretched long and velvet thick, the kind that made you hesitate before taking the next step. My boots tapped lightly against the polished floor as I turned the final corner, and froze. Someone was already there. A woman, leaning against his desk like she belonged, like she'd always belonged. One perfectly manicured hand rested lightly on his arm, her fingers curled just slightly, possessive and casual at once. Her legs were crossed just so, her silhouette a study in control and elegance. Her voice, low and cultured, rolled toward me in amused tones, though I couldn't make out the words. The sight of her hit me like a punch to the gut. She was stunning. That was the first thing my brain registered. Sleek dark hair cascading like liquid ink over her shoulder, high cheekbones catching the golden afternoon light, lips painted a deep, calculated crimson. Everything about her was sharp and intentional, like she was carved from ice and velvet. But it wasn't just her beauty that unsettled me. It was the way my instincts roared the moment I saw her. A growl curled low in my chest, silent, but real. My fingers clenched around the edges of my paper as heat flushed through me. My breath stuttered, my body tensing in ways I didn't understand. All I knew was that every fiber of my being hated the way she touched him, the way she looked at him as if he was hers.
I sensed her long before I saw her. Eliana. Her scent drifted down the corridor, wild pine, snow, lightning. The moment it hit me, something ancient in me snapped to attention. My pulse quickened, my wolf surged, and then Regina placed her hand on my arm. I didn't flinch, only because I'd trained myself not to. But the timing wasn't lost on me. She always had perfect timing when it came to manipulation. Her voice was low and pointed. Speaking of pack politics, she no longer had the right to involve herself in. "I'm busy, Regina," I said, tone even but firm. She ignored the warning, leaning in further, right as footsteps echoed outside. And then she arrived. Eliana rounded the corner, paper in hand, eyes immediately locking on Regina. I watched the moment hit her, the split-second freeze, the way her entire body tensed. Her expression didn't flicker much, but I could feel the change in the air. Sharp, electric. My instincts flared hot and immediate. Regina shifted her posture, catching the reaction like blood in water. She stood straighter, let her fingers linger on my sleeve just a second longer. Possession. Display. I hated it. But what I hated more was the look in Eliana's eyes. Confusion, heat, something like betrayal she hadn't earned but clearly felt. I stepped forward, intercepting. "Eliana," I said, relief and tension mixing in my voice. "Just the student I was expecting. Do come in."
I took one step inside and felt the woman's eyes rake over me like I was something beneath her shoes. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Everything about her, perfect posture, expensive perfume, voice laced with fake concern, was a challenge in disguise. "You look a little tired, dear," she said with a razor's edge of sweetness. "Maybe you should rest instead of overworking, Professor Calloway." I blinked. The paper in my hand curled as my fingers tightened. My jaw locked. My blood hummed, my muscles tight with restrained fury. I didn't know why she was triggering this response in me. I didn't speak. Not to her. Instead, I turned to him. "Here," I said, offering the paper to Atlas. "Sorry it's late."
Something pulled me forward. Not choice, but instinct. I stepped toward her to take the paper, my fingers brushing hers. Her skin was warm, trembling slightly, and the moment we touched, my wolf went completely still. Everything inside me zeroed in on her. Not Regina, not the tension crackling through the room, only Eliana. She looked at me with barely concealed restraint, like she was hanging on by a thread, but underneath it, I caught something else. Uncertainty. Insecurity. The way she'd stepped back when Regina had spoken, the flicker of doubt in her eyes. It hit me wrong. All wrong. My wolf bristled, restless and agitated in a way that made no sense. Why the hell did I care if she felt unsure? Why did seeing her shrink back make something fierce and protective surge in my chest? This was stupid. She was practically a stranger. but watching her scent shift, all heat and wild instinct now, stirred and sharp and untrained. While Regina stood there oblivious to what it meant, something in me snapped into focus. Regina didn't see it, didn't understand. But I did, and I couldn't stand having her here while Eliana looked like she was ready to bolt. "Regina," I said, my gaze never leaving Eliana. "We'll talk another time." A pause. Silence stretched like a wire, then the rustle of expensive fabric and high-heeled retreat. The door shut with a heavy click.
The moment she disappeared, the air seemed to exhale. My shoulders dropped, though fire still raced through my veins. "Your girlfriend?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. She was part of my past. His voice carried weight I didn't understand. And she's never been good at staying there. She doesn't seem to understand the word no. No. The single word fell heavy between us. She never did. I stepped back, needing distance, needing to think, to breathe. But even with space between us, I felt that invisible thread pulling taut. The tension hadn't shattered. It had crystallized into something sharper, something that made my heart stutter and my skin feel electric. I shouldn't have come. The admission escaped as barely more than a whisper, regret already blooming in my chest. "Don't." Atlas's voice dropped to something raw, urgent. "I'm glad you did." When I looked at him, really looked, something unnamed sparked in the space between us, something that felt like the beginning of everything. Chapter 5. The dreams had gotten worse, or better, or something in between. Each night I ran through a vast moonlit forest, alone, free, breath clouding in the cold air. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. Trees whipped past me. The ground shifted beneath bare feet. The air was thick with pine and earth and something else, and something calling to me. I'd wake tangled in my sheets, heart racing, lungs aching, restless. Hungry for something I couldn't name. Chloe, of course, had a solution. "We're going out tonight," she said, already pulling on her glittery heels. "Your birthday is in a week. Fake ID, questionable decisions, and your first real hangover. It's tradition." "Shouldn't I be scared?" I muttered. "You should be excited. We're going to the den. Music, dancing, barely legal flirting. Let your weird vibes chill for a night." I tried to laugh. But the tension under my skin, it never really went away anymore. The nightclub was a storm of light and sound. Music pulsed through the walls like a second heartbeat. The crowd pressed close, too close, but Chloe was beside me, practically glowing with excitement. After 2 drinks, the edges of everything blurred. I laughed more easily, danced with strangers. For a moment I did forget, until I wandered too far. I ended up by the far wall, trying to cool off. That's when the 2 guys appeared. At first they were just annoying, laughing too loudly, standing too close. But then one touched my arm. The other grinned. "Hey, gorgeous, where have you been hiding?" "Back off." I tried to step around them, but my balance was off. "You don't need to play hard to get." Another hand reached for me. I shoved it away, my pulse spiking into panic. "Stop." And then I couldn't speak. My body wouldn't move fast enough. Their hands grabbed at my waist, and my vision blurred, a flash of heat, panic, rage, then everything snapped.
I hadn't meant to stay long. Reese and I were just checking in. The den was one of our more stable territories. Club noise, human chaos, but nothing supernatural usually stirred here. And then I saw her. Eliana. She was near the bar, laughing too loud, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with mischief and liquor. A group of girls surrounded her, and a drink sloshed dangerously in her hand as one of them nudged her toward the dance floor. She looked nothing like the quiet student who sat at the edge of my lectures, always watching me like she saw something no one else did. Too young, too reckless, and technically still a rogue. No pack, no allegiance, just a girl with an untethered wolf, living inside my territory without realizing the risk that carried. I should have left right then. I told myself to. Hell, I'd been telling myself to create distance for weeks, but I hadn't. I'd noticed the way she lingered after lectures, the way she asked questions just to keep me talking, the way she found excuses to pass near my office when no one else was around. She was doing it on purpose, and I'd let her. Worse, part of me had looked forward to it. So when I saw her tonight, dressed in a way that made my thoughts veer places they shouldn't, laughing like the world had never touched her, I froze. She didn't belong here. Not like this, not unguarded. But I turned away. I reminded myself she was just a student, just a rogue, just a problem I couldn't afford to make worse. And then I felt it. Her scent hit me again, but this time the brightness was soured by panic. A spike of fear sharp enough to cut through the haze of perfume, alcohol, sweat, and smoke. My heart stuttered, every instinct locked into place like a weapon drawn. I pushed through the crowd, following the scent, hunting it like prey. My wolf was suddenly alert, ears pinned, teeth bared inside me. She was near the back wall, cornered. Two men pressed in close, one whispering something in her ear while the other laughed and touched her waist. She was shaking her head, confused, trying to pull away, failing. That's all it took. The first man went down hard, my fist cracking against his jaw. The second I grabbed by the collar and slammed into the wall so hard the plaster cracked. She stumbled, nearly collapsing. I caught her before she hit the floor. "Eliana," I said sharply. Her eyes blinked open, wide and glassy. She gave a dazed, drunken grin. "Professor Calloway?" Her fingers curled into my shirt. You smell so good." I exhaled, jaw tight. "Are you hurt?" She giggled. "No, just dizzy and warm." "You shouldn't be here," I snapped. "You shouldn't be drinking. You shouldn't be anywhere near them." "You're mad," she muttered, poking at my chest. "You don't even know why you're mad," Seth. "I wasn't doing anything wrong." "You were alone. That's reckless at best." "I'm not weak," she slurred. "Professor, you just don't see it." Something inside me went still. Beneath the haze, there was fire. Her wolf stirred behind her eyes, close to waking. And then, as I lifted her into my arms, she leaned into me, breath hot against my neck. "You're mine," she whispered. And just like that, the bond roared. She didn't know what the words meant. Not yet. But I did. That invisible thread I'd been trying to ignore wrapped around my spine and yanked hard. Every part of me locked onto her with brutal clarity. She is mine. I carried her out of the club, her body a warm, quiet weight against mine. Every step away from her was impossible. Every moment near her was torture. I drove her back in silence, found her dorm key in her bag, tucked her under the blanket and stood there too long, watching the rise and fall of her breathing. A rogue, a student, a girl on the edge of a shift that would change everything. Her 19th birthday was days away. The awakening was near. I could feel it, just beneath her skin. And when it came, I wouldn't be able to look away anymore. Not from her, not from the bond, not from what fate had carved into both of us. And God help anyone who tried to stand between us when it did.
Chapter 6. My heart pounded as I approached Professor Calloway's office, the email still echoing in my mind. Academic concerns, whatever that meant. I wasn't looking forward to facing him after the club incident. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door. He stood by the window, back turned to me, the afternoon light cutting sharp angles across his face. When he turned, those steel-gray eyes pinned me instantly. "Eliana," he said, low and calm, I replied, trying to sound steadier than I felt. "You wanted to see me?" He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit." I sank down, fingers twisting nervously in my lap. "So," he began, "I wanted to ask about your background, your family. Where are you from originally?" His voice was casual, but something in the way he looked at me made my skin prickle. The question felt strange, too personal. I hesitated before answering, careful not to give too much away. "My parents just moved back to Oak Haven recently. Before that, Portland." He nodded, eyes sharp. "And your birth family?" I blinked, caught off guard. "I'm adopted. I don't really know much. It was a closed adoption through an orphanage." His gaze didn't waver. "Have you ever felt different? Unusual? Experienced things others don't?" I narrowed my eyes, studying him for a flicker of judgment or disbelief. Did I say or did something when I was drunk? "Different, how?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly, voice quieter. "Heightened senses, vivid dreams, strange intuitions." I shifted in my seat, feeling suddenly defensive. "I guess I've always had weird dreams. Nothing more. Why?" He gave me a long look, like he was trying to unravel something beneath the surface. I tightened my grip on my hands. "Is this about what happened at the club?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "I'm really sorry. I wasn't myself." He raised a hand, cutting me off. "That's not why I called you." There was a pause heavy with things unsaid. Then he asked quietly, "Do you truly not know what you are?" My throat went dry. I stared at him, confused and wary. "What do you mean?" He took a step forward, his presence overwhelming but not threatening. The air between us thickened. I felt my pulse quicken, my breath catch. I wanted to back away, but I couldn't move. "Professor," I whispered, unsure what else to say. His eyes searched mine, flickering with something raw and urgent. Suddenly, he stepped back, breaking the tension as if startled by his own feelings. "Your academic standing is fine," he said sharply, voice clipped. "That's all. You may go." I stood slowly, heart pounding, the question swirling and unanswered as I left.
The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with the weight of what I'd just realized. She didn't know. Not yet. That fact hit harder than I expected. She was my mate, there was no doubt. The connection was undeniable, locked in place the night I saved her. But she was still blind to what she was. Her wolf lay dormant, her instincts barely awakened. She was a pup wandering without a pack or guidance. If she shifted unprepared, she could hurt herself, or worse, others. I needed answers about her past, about how she came to be so alone, because whatever happened next, I'd be there, to protect her, to claim her, to bring her home.
Chapter 7. The hallway outside Professor Calloway's office felt different as I walked away. Longer somehow, as if the walls were pressing in on me. His words echoed in my mind, academic concerns. But the questions he'd asked weren't about my coursework. They were about me, about things I'd never told anyone. Where were you born? Do you remember your birth family? Why would a mythology professor care about my adoption? And why did his eyes seem to strip away every carefully constructed layer I'd built around myself? When I found Chloe and Liam in the student lounge, they looked up expectantly from their respective laptops. "How'd it go with Calloway?" Chloe asked, not bothering to remove her earbuds completely. "Fine," I said, settling into the worn leather chair across from them. "Just some questions about my paper on territorial mythology. Nothing major." The lie came easily, too easily. But something about the meeting felt too raw, too personal to share. Liam nodded absently and returned to his notes, while Chloe's attention had already drifted back to her phone. I should have felt relieved by their lack of interest. Instead, I felt more isolated than ever. The changes started that night. I'd always been a light sleeper, but now every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of leaves outside my dorm window was deafening. The distant hum of the vending machine down the hall thrummed through my bones. Even the soft breathing of my roommate across the room felt intrusive, too close. I pressed my pillow over my head, but it didn't help. If anything, it made the sounds more intense, more immediate. By morning, I was exhausted, but the hypersensitivity didn't fade with daylight. Walking across campus became an assault on my senses. The scent of the dining hall's bacon was so overwhelming I had to take a detour. The perfume of a girl passing by made my eyes water. Even the autumn flowers in the quad, usually pleasant, now seemed cloying, artificial. I found myself avoiding crowds, taking longer routes to class, seeking out quiet spaces where the sensory bombardment was manageable. The dreams were the worst part. Every night I ran through forests that felt more real than my waking life. Ancient pines towered above me, their branches creating a canopy so thick that only fragments of moonlight touched the forest floor. The earth beneath my feet was soft with decades of fallen needles, and every step sent up the rich scent of loam and growing things. I wasn't alone in these dreams. Shadows moved between the trees, graceful, powerful, wild. They called to me without words, and I followed without question. My body moved differently here, stronger and more fluid than it had ever been in reality. My lungs pulled in the crisp night air like they were made for it. I woke from these dreams with my heart hammering against my ribs, my skin hot and tingling. Sometimes I found myself at my window, staring out at the manicured campus lawns with an inexplicable longing for something wilder, something real. It was during one of these restless nights that I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and froze. For just a moment, barely a heartbeat. My eyes weren't brown, they were amber. Not the pale amber of whiskey, but the deep, molten gold of a flame's heart. I blinked and they were brown again. Normal. Human. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles white. What the hell is happening to me? The mirror offered no answers, only my own pale, frightened face staring back.
Eliana was unraveling faster than I'd anticipated. From my office window, I watched her cross the quad with the careful, measured steps of someone fighting against their own instincts. Her shoulders were rigid, her jaw clenched. She was trying so hard to appear normal that she stood out like a beacon to anyone who knew what to look for. Her 19th birthday was 3 days away. In the supernatural world, 19 was the age of awakening, when dormant abilities surfaced, when the supernatural claimed those who belonged to it. For wolves, it was often triggered by strong emotion, by stress, by the presence of others of their kind. I pulled Eliana's file from my desk drawer, though I knew its contents by heart. Born in the Cascade Mountains of Washington. Parents unknown. Found by hikers when she was barely 3 years old, speaking in fragments about the pack and the moon calling. The authorities had dismissed it as the imaginative prattling of a traumatized child. They'd been wrong. I'd been tracking her for 2 months, ever since her scent had first drifted across my territory. Wolf but untrained, wild but caged, powerful but completely unaware of what she was. And now she was here, in my territory, on the verge of an awakening that could destroy everything I'd built. Through the window, I watched Regina intercept Eliana near the library steps. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in her posture, the way her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Regina said something, and Eliana's head snapped up. For a moment, her eyes flashed gold. Time was running out. Chapter 8. The manila folder sat before me like a loaded weapon. Rhys stood at attention near the door, his usual casual demeanor replaced by something harder, more alert. Myra occupied the chair across from my desk. Her healer's composure cracked just enough to reveal the storm beneath. "Tell me," I said, my voice rougher than I intended. "Every detail." Rhys shifted, his jaw tight. The Vance adoption was completely legitimate. Standard procedures, proper documentation. The social worker, Margaret Chen, handled it by the book. She actually kept in touch with the family for years to make sure Eliana was adjusting well. The orphanage, St. Catherine's, closed down naturally when funding dried up. Nothing suspicious about any of it. They had no idea what she was, Myra added quietly. To them, she was just a traumatized child who'd survived a terrible tragedy. A miracle, really. I stared at the photograph clipped to the file, a grainy image of a small girl with dark hair and haunted eyes, taken by the hikers who'd found her. The resemblance to Eliana was unmistakable, but it was more than that. Something about her posture, the way she held herself even as a traumatized child, spoke of strength, of survival against impossible odds. She was found 3 days after the massacre, Rhys continued. Dehydrated, terrified, but alive. The hikers who found her said she kept asking for her mama and talking about the bad wolves. Everyone assumed she was just a human child who'd witnessed something terrible and gotten lost in the aftermath. "The Moonridge Pack," I said, the words tasting like ash. Even 15 years later, their name was spoken in hushed tones across pack territories. "You're certain?" Myra's expression darkened. "The location matches. Deep in the Cascades, about 40 miles from where she was found. The timeline fits. The massacre happened in late spring. She was discovered in early summer. Atlas, the Moonridge Pack, wasn't just powerful. They were legendary. 300 wolves, some of the oldest bloodlines in existence. They'd never been defeated, never even seriously challenged. Until Markov." She leaned forward, pulling a second photograph from the folder. This one was older, more formal. A pack gathering, but not just any pack. This was the Moonridge Pack in their prime. Nearly 50 wolves filled the frame, arranged in ceremonial formation. The power radiating from even this old photograph was palpable. But it was the woman in the center who made my breath catch. She had Eliana's eyes. The same stubborn set to her jaw, the same way of holding her head when she was thinking. But where Eliana's gaze was often uncertain, this woman's was fierce, protective, regal. The room fell silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. I traced the woman's face with my finger, imagining her last moments. The terror, the desperate courage, the knowledge that she was about to die but refusing to abandon the children under her protection. The fact that Markov, with all his power, all his resources, had needed an army to bring down the Moonridge Pack spoke volumes about what they'd been, and what Eliana truly was. 6 bodies were found in the nursery, Rhys continued, his voice carefully neutral. All accounted for except one, a 4-year-old girl, Elena's daughter, the last of the Moonridge bloodline. Eliana. The name felt different now, weighted with history and loss. She wasn't just the mysterious girl who'd wandered into my territory, who'd stirred something in me I'd thought long dead. She was the sole survivor of one of the most brutal pack massacres in recent memory, the lost princess of a bloodline that had been wiped from existence. And she was my mate. Victor Markov, I said, the name like poison on my tongue. Every alpha in the continental United States knew that name. The Southern Territories had been his domain for over 2 decades, and his influence stretched far beyond official pack boundaries. Where is he now? Reese and Myra exchanged glances. It was Myra who answered. Rumor is that his pack has grown to nearly 500 wolves. He controls everything from Texas to Georgia, and his reach extends into Mexico. But here's the thing. He's been hiding for the last 2 years. Word is the Supernatural Bureau has been investigating him for unsanctioned territory expansion and violation of the Accords. He's in hiding? I asked, a spark of hope flickering in my chest. Deep hiding, Risk confirmed. No public appearances, no pack gatherings, no territorial raids. His lieutenants are running day-to-day operations while he stays off the Bureau's radar. My wolf stirred, a low growl building in my chest. Victor Markov. The name alone was enough to make seasoned alphas lock their borders and strengthen their defenses. He ruled the Southern Territories with an iron fist, commanding one of the largest and most brutal packs in North America. What made him truly terrifying wasn't just his power, but his methodical cruelty. So for now, she's safe from him, I said, though the words felt strange on my tongue. For now, Myra said carefully. But Atlas, if he's been systematically hunting the old bloodlines for years, and she's the last of the Moonridge line, the moment he can move freely again, the moment the Bureau pressure lets up, he'll come for her. He's patient, but he's not going to forget. Then she's been running from a ghost, I said grimly. A nightmare she doesn't even remember. A nightmare that had systematically destroyed one of the most powerful packs in our history, but was now forced to lurk in the shadows like a common criminal. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the campus. Somewhere out there, Eliana was going about her human life, unaware that her 19th birthday, 2 days away, would change everything, unaware that the man who destroyed her family might still be hunting her. Her shift, I said, not turning from the window. She can't do it alone. No, Myra agreed. She has no idea what's happening to her. When the shift comes, she'll be confused, frightened. Without guidance, she could panic. And if she shifts in public, around humans... She didn't need to finish the sentence. The Supernatural Bureau, I said grimly. They'll be all over this if there's any exposure, any hint that our world has been revealed to humans. Exactly, and they won't care about her circumstances or her trauma. A rogue shift in public is a containment issue first, individual welfare second. I turned back to face them, my decision crystallizing. We bring her to the compound tonight. Atlas, Reese said carefully, she doesn't know what she is. If we just take her. If we don't, she'll shift in public, I cut him off. In her dorm room, on campus, surrounded by humans. The Bureau will swoop in before we can blink, and once they have her... I left the implications hanging. I won't let that happen. Myra stood, understanding the gravity of the situation. She'll be confused when it happens, frightened. She'll need calm voices, familiar scents, a controlled environment. The compound is the safest place. And if she fights us? Riss asked. I met his eyes, feeling the weight of leadership, of the impossible choices that came with protecting those under my care. Then we help her through it, but we keep her safe and we keep our world hidden. I moved to the safe behind my desk, pulling out the emergency protocols I'd hoped never to use. Reese, I want the compound on full lockdown. No one in or out without my permission. Myra, prepare the shifting room. Make sure it's comfortable, not clinical. And get Sarah. I want our most experienced guide there when it happens. This needs to be as gentle as possible. As they left to carry out my orders, I went back to college, standing at the window, watching the campus grow dark. Students moved between the buildings, their laughter and conversation drifting up to my office. Normal lives, normal problems. Eliana was out there somewhere, maybe in her dorm room, maybe walking the paths I'd memorized. In a few hours, I would shatter her world. I would take her from everything she knew and force her to confront a reality that would terrify her. But I would keep her alive. The photograph of Alina Moonridge watched me from the desk, her fierce maternal gaze a reminder of what I was truly fighting for. Not just my mate, but the last hope of a bloodline that had already paid too high a price. I picked up my phone and dialed Reese. It's time.
Chapter 9. 2 days before my 19th birthday, I woke up expecting just another ordinary morning. I rolled out of bed in my shoebox-sized dorm room, already bracing myself for the caffeine withdrawal headache I knew was coming. My plans for the day were pretty basic. Survive classes, maybe guilt Chloe and Liam into dinner plans, and definitely avoid thinking about how I'd be legally too old for my favorite teen fantasy book lists. My parents had called last night, Dad with his terrible puns, Mom promising she'd outdo herself with the chocolate cake this year. I was supposed to head home in 2 days, celebrate, pretend I had my life together. But something felt off. It started as a strange tightness in my skin, like I was wearing clothes 2 sizes too small. My shirt tag scratched the back of my neck like it had a personal vendetta. The air felt heavy, like the room hadn't been aired out in weeks. And every time the dorm heater kicked in, it sounded like it was screaming directly into my ear. By noon, I wasn't just uncomfortable, I was unraveling. My head throbbed with a sharp, almost blinding ache, like someone was driving knitting needles behind my eyes. My limbs ached like I'd gone a few rounds in a boxing ring I didn't remember entering. I was sweating through my hoodie, but my fingertips were ice cold. Cool. Great. Love that for me. I tried to study, then tried lying flat, then tried texting Chloe for her magical cold remedy, but nothing helped. I called in sick for my afternoon classes, which I'd literally never done. The buzzing of my phone was like a jackhammer on my nerves, so I shoved it under a pillow and curled into my blanket pile. By evening, I was shivering under 4 layers, one of which was a heated blanket. And then there was a tap at my window. I froze. Second-story window. That was not a normal sound. I blinked blearily toward it, eyes watery and vision swimming. There was a shape there, a shadow. And then as the wind blew his hood back, I realized who it was. Atlas. Professor Atlas freaking Calloway, outside, on my window. I sat up too fast, nearly blacking out. "What the?" I croaked, throat dry. "Why are you Spider-Manning up my dorm window, Professor?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with that intense, smoldering, borderline ridiculous gaze he probably practiced in mirrors. He mouthed something I couldn't quite make out. I squinted. "Are you seriously mouthing words at me?" He pressed his palm to the glass. His lips moved again. "Trust me. You need to come with me." I blinked. Blinked again. Nope. This is a fever dream. I'm hallucinating. You are not outside my window looking like dark academia Batman telling me to climb out with you. He pointed to the door now, urgent. And suddenly, despite the complete and utter insanity of the situation, something inside me agreed. It was like my brain had gone offline, and something older, deeper, more animal was running the show. My skin prickled, my pulse skipped. I opened my mouth, trying to make sense of anything. I can't even stand. I'm sick. I'm like real sick. Like probably dying sick. Atlas's expression didn't shift, but his eyes, God, those eyes, they looked afraid. He jabbed toward the door again. 5 minutes, he mouthed. I stared at him. Fine, I rasped. But if this ends in cult sacrifice, I swear to God, I'm haunting you with unfinished assignments. He gave the faintest twitch of a smile before disappearing from the ledge with a soft thud. I sat frozen for a second. Then I groaned into my pillow. I'm officially an idiot. I'm following my hot professor into the night while possibly dying. This is how I get a true crime podcast episode named after me. First, I needed to call my parents. The phone rang 3 times before Dad's familiar voice answered. "Liana, perfect timing. Mom's just pulling some practice cupcakes out of the oven to test for your birthday cake. And..." "Dad," I interrupted, my voice strained. I'm not going to be able to come home this weekend." The silence on the other end was deafening. "What? Sweetheart, it's your birthday in 2 days. We've been planning this for weeks." "I know, and I'm sorry, but something's come up. Chloe's grandmother invited us to her place upstate for a few days. It's a really important opportunity for me." The lie came easier than I expected, though it left a bitter taste in my mouth. "Liana, you sound terrible. Are you sick?" "Just a little under the weather," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The fresh air will be good for me." I could hear Mom in the background, her voice rising with concern. Dad relayed the conversation, and I winced at the disappointment in their voices. "We had everything planned," Mom said when Dad put her on speaker. "The cake, the presents, your favorite dinner, we were going to celebrate early since you have classes Monday." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. We can celebrate when I get back, okay? I promise." "How long will you be gone?" Dad asked. I'm not sure. A few days, maybe a week. I'll call you every day, I promise." There was another pause, and I could practically hear them exchanging worried glances. "All right, sweetheart," Mom said finally. "But if you feel worse, you call us immediately. We'll come get you, no matter where you are." "I will. I love you both." "We love you too, birthday girl." The call ended, and I immediately dialed Chloe's number. She answered on the first ring. "Liana, where have you been? I've been texting you all day. Liam and I were going to come check on you, but Jessica said you were sleeping." "Chloe, I need you to do something for me," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I need you to cover for me with my parents." What's going on?" "I told them I'm going to your grandmother's place upstate for a few days. If they call you or ask you anything, you need to back me up, okay?" "Liana, what the hell is going on? You sound awful and you're talking crazy." I took a shaky breath. "I can't explain everything right now, but something's come up. About my adoption, about my birth family. I need to follow up on some leads, and I can't do it from here." It was another lie, but one that felt closer to the truth than anything else I could say. There was something about my origins, about who I really was, that Atlas knew. I was certain of it. "Your birth family?" Chloe's voice softened. "Liana, why didn't you tell me you were looking into that?" "Because I wasn't sure there was anything to find. But now I think there might be. I need to do this, Chloe. I need to know who I really am." "Okay," she said after a moment. "Okay, I'll cover for you. But you have to promise me you'll be careful, and you have to stay in touch. I promise. And Liana, I hope you find what you're looking for. We can celebrate your birthday when you get back." The call ended, and I stared at my phone for a long moment. In the span of 10 minutes, I'd lied to the 3 people I cared about most in the world. But somehow, it felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. I grabbed my jacket and a small bag with a few essentials. The walk to the lobby felt like a marathon. Every step sent shockwaves of pain through my body, and I had to stop twice to catch my breath. The fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with malevolent intensity, and the chatter of students in the common area was like nails on a chalkboard. Atlas was waiting by the entrance, his tall frame unmistakable even in the crowd. When he saw me, his face tightened with concern. I must have looked as bad as I felt. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He placed a gentle hand on my elbow, supporting me as we walked toward the exit. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of something through my system. Not pain, but its opposite, a sudden, inexplicable sense of rightness. "Where are we going?" I managed to ask as we stepped into the cold night air. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "Somewhere I can help you." A sleek black SUV was waiting at the curb. Atlas helped me into the passenger seat, and I sank into the leather upholstery with a sigh of relief. The interior was warm and quiet, a blessed respite from the sensory assault of the dorm. As we pulled away from campus, I watched the familiar buildings shrink in the side mirror. My old life, my human life, was disappearing behind us. And despite the pain, despite the fear, despite the complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew about myself, I felt a strange sense of peace, even if I didn't understand what that meant yet.
I watched her in the passenger seat, her face pale and drawn with pain. The shift was close now. I could smell it on her, that wild electric scent that preceded a transformation. Her wolf was fighting to emerge, and her mind was struggling to comprehend what was happening to her body. She'd handled the phone calls better than I'd expected. The lies had come naturally, as if some part of her already understood that this was a secret worth keeping. Her parents would be disappointed about missing her birthday celebration, but they'd be alive. That was what mattered. "How long?" Myra asked from the driver's seat. "Hours, maybe less," I replied quietly. "Her scent is getting stronger." Eliana stirred at our voices, her amber eyes fluttering open. "Atlas, are we almost there?" "Almost," I assured her. "Just rest." But I could see the restlessness building in her, the way her hands clenched and unclenched, the way her breathing grew shallow and rapid. Her wolf was awakening, and it was going to be a fight. The compound came into view, its lights a welcome beacon in the darkness. Reese was waiting at the entrance, along with 2 other pack members. They would help carry her to the shifting room if necessary. "Eliana," I said softly, "we're here." She looked up at the building, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "This is where you live. This is where we live," I corrected. She nodded, though I could see the confusion in her expression. She didn't understand yet, but she would. Soon, she would understand everything. The first shift was always the hardest, but I would be there with her every step of the way, and I would not let her face this alone.
Chapter 10. The world outside the SUV was blanketed in white, the snowfall steady and silent as we climbed higher into the hills. I'd been drifting in and out of a fever-drenched haze, but when the car finally stopped, the cold air jolted me back into awareness. Atlas opened the door and leaned in. "We're here," he murmured, too exhausted to form words. He didn't hesitate. His strong arm slid beneath me and lifted me from the seat like I weighed nothing. My cheek pressed against his chest, and I could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It calmed the frantic pacing in my own. As he carried me up the winding path, I caught glimpses of the place through the veil of snow. Houses, beautiful, rustic, and nestled into the forested hillside, dotted the slope like something out of a fairy tale. The scent of pine was sharp and fresh, the cold air biting at my skin despite Atlas's warmth. "This is your home?" I mumbled. "Our home," he corrected gently, his breath warm against my temple. "This is Packland." He didn't stop at the cluster of houses near the main road. Instead, he kept walking, carrying me farther up the hill toward a more secluded cabin tucked into a clearing surrounded by trees. The door creaked open, and warmth poured out. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. He carried me straight to a small bedroom and laid me on a soft bed with flannel sheets and thick blankets. I barely registered him, pulling my boots off before the fever surged again. The rest of the night was a blur. My skin burned. My muscles twisted and stretched with an ache that made me whimper. I dreamed in flashes, wolves running through snow, eyes like fire, the sound of my own voice howling into the wind. I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. And then, at some point in the night, everything went still. When I woke, it was morning. Pale sunlight filtered through the frost-covered window, and the fire was still glowing low in the hearth. The pain was different now, deeper, more purposeful. Something inside me was stirring, pressing against my bones, demanding release. I sat up with effort, sweat clinging to my skin, and looked toward the doorway. Atlas was there. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The pressure hit like a wave. I gasped and fell back to the mattress, every muscle in my body tightening at once. My spine arched, my teeth clenched. It was like being pulled inside out, my body twisting and realigning. It should have been unbearable, but somehow it wasn't. It was pain with purpose, heat with transformation. I screamed once, and then it was over. I blinked, and the world had changed. Everything was sharper, brighter. The world smelled alive, fresh pine, cold earth, firewood, and him. Atlas. I didn't understand the instinct, but it was overwhelming. I needed to touch him, claim him. My vision narrowed to him and him alone. I growled, a low, possessive sound, and lunged toward him. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, steady and calm, eyes full of something I didn't have a name for. My teeth grazed his shoulder. I stopped, confused. Why had I done that? He placed a hand gently against my wolf's head, his fingers sliding behind my ears, calming the fury and the instinct. And then the exhaustion hit me like a wave. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer a wolf. I was human and naked. Atlas had wrapped me in a thick blanket and was carrying me across the room. His bare forearm supported my back, and his other arm was beneath my legs. He looked down at me, and his expression was unreadable, somewhere between awe and relief. "You did it," he whispered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was dry, and my body felt like I'd been struck by lightning and left to dry out in the sun. He laid me down in the bed again and pulled the blanket tighter around me. "Sleep, Eliana. We'll talk when you're ready." His voice was low, steady. I didn't question it. I closed my eyes, and the darkness welcomed me like an old friend. When I woke again, the light in the room was different, brighter. It had to be midday. The ache in my body had dulled to a faint hum. Atlas sat beside the bed, a steaming mug in his hand. He looked up the moment my eyes opened. "Happy birthday," he said softly. I blinked. "It's my birthday?" He nodded. "You're 19 today, and now you know the truth." I sat up slowly, the blanket still clutched around me. "What truth?" "You're not human, Eliana. You're a shifter, a wolf, like me." I stared at him. The memories flooded in, fur, fire, hunger, the way I had nearly bitten him. My throat went dry. "I almost attacked you." "You didn't," he said. "Your wolf recognized me. It was instinct." "Instinct?" He hesitated, then reached for my hand, his fingers warm and grounding. "You bit me, or almost did, because your wolf was trying to mark me. Because we're mates." I pulled my hand back slightly. "Mates?" He exhaled, as if searching for the right words. "It's more than love, more than attraction. It's a soul connection, a bond created by the moon goddess herself. It's rare and unbreakable." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "But I don't even know you." "You will," he said gently. "This bond, it's eternal. We were meant for each other before we even met." I shook my head. "That sounds impossible." "I know." He didn't push. "But it's real. You felt it. Your wolf knows it, and deep down so do you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My world had been flipped upside down. I wasn't human. I was a wolf, a mated wolf. Tears pricked at my eyes. "Why me? Why now?" "There are things I'll explain in time," he said, "about your past, your family. But for now, you need rest and food and to just be without fear." I let the silence settle. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel afraid. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Chapter 11. The next few days passed in a haze of healing, learning, and him. I was still trying to wrap my head around what I'd become, a shifter, a wolf, a mate, when the more urgent, more distracting realization kept tugging at my awareness. I was drawn to Atlas, in a way that went beyond reason. That first morning after the shift, when he handed me a steaming mug and whispered, "Happy birthday," I hadn't expected the warmth that bloomed low in my belly just from the sound of his voice. When our hands brushed, a spark jumped between us, hot and heady like static and lightning all at once. I pulled away, but it lingered in my veins like fire. "You're not just feeling attraction," he explained, his voice velvet smooth. "The bond, it's instinctual, deep, it affects everything. Touch, scent, even how close we want to be." I stared at him. "So this need, this pull toward you." "It's real," he said, his voice thickening, "and it goes both ways." His eyes flicked to my lips, and for a breathless moment neither of us moved. "I'm not ready," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "I know," he murmured, "but I'll wait, as long as it takes." But the way his jaw tensed, the way he exhaled through his nose, I knew waiting wouldn't be easy for either of us. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The bond was a constant hum under my skin, tugging me toward him like a tide. So when I padded out into the quiet cabin hallway, I wasn't surprised to find him standing at the kitchen counter, shirtless, sipping something from a glass. The firelight kissed the muscles of his back, cast golden shadows along his spine. He turned at my approach, his dark eyes meeting mine, and heating instantly. "You should be resting," he said, but his voice had dipped, lower now. "So should you," I replied, stepping closer. The silence between us shimmered. He reached for me slowly, brushing a hand against my cheek. "You smell like night and frost," he murmured, "and mine." I should have pulled back. I didn't. I stepped closer until the warmth of his bare chest touched the thin fabric of my shirt. His hand cupped the side of my neck, his thumb brushing against the curve of my throat where the bond thrummed. "Eliana," he said, voice strained, "if you kiss me now, I won't be able to pretend I don't want more." My breath hitched. "I'm not asking you to pretend." His mouth found mine before the words were done. The kiss was fierce, hungry, claiming, and yet impossibly tender. His hands tangled in my hair, mine clutched his shoulders, and the bond roared between us like wildfire. I felt every bit of him, his strength, his restraint, the ache he held back because he respected me enough to wait. When we broke apart, his forehead pressed to mine, both of us panting. "Soon," he whispered, his voice raw. "But not tonight." I nodded, barely able to speak, but later, as I lay in bed again, the scent of him still clinging to me, I knew I was his, and he was mine, even if I didn't understand all the rules yet. Next day, training. Training was harder with that kiss still echoing in my bones. Every time he touched my arm to adjust my posture, heat flared across my skin. Every time his breath grazed my ear to whisper instructions, my knees nearly buckled. Even Myra noticed. "She's distracted," she muttered to Atlas after I stumbled mid-sprint. "You've got her hormones tangled." "She's adjusting," he said evenly, but his jaw flexed. I was adjusting, all right, to a world where I wanted to bite my mate and kiss him in equal measure, and some dangerous part of me wanted him to bite back.
Her scent was everywhere, on my clothes, my skin, haunting my bed. The kiss had nearly broken my control, but it was worth every second of restraint. She needed time, and I would give it to her. Even if every night I dreamed of her curling into me, skin to skin, our bond sealed in every way it was meant to be.
Final day before departure. The night before I left to visit my parents, we sat in his living room in silence. The fire burned low. I was curled on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, while Atlas sat close enough that his thigh brushed mine. "I'm scared," I admitted quietly. He turned toward me. "Of going back?" I nodded. "Of pretending I'm normal. Of seeing my parents and lying to their faces." "You're not lying," he said. "You're protecting them." I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. His arm came around me immediately, pulling me against his chest. "Will I ever be the same?" I whispered. His lips brushed my hair. "No, but that's not a bad thing." I tilted my head to look at him. "And you? What if I can't be what you need?" His eyes met mine, dark and tender. "You already are." I kissed him again. Slower, softer this time. A promise, a spark of something we weren't quite ready to name, but we both knew was coming. Soon. Chapter 12. Returning to campus felt like trying to squeeze back into a life that no longer fit. The buildings were the same. The lecture halls, the sidewalks, the sea of students rushing between classes with earbuds in and coffee in hand. None of that had changed. But I was different now. No, not just different. I was other. I walked through the halls like a ghost wearing my own skin. The scent of so many humans pressed in on me like a storm cloud. Their perfumes, deodorants, sweat, coffee breath. Before I might not have noticed. Now it made my nose wrinkle and my wolf stir with irritation. But Atlas had told me to try. "Return to your routine," he'd said. "Ground yourself in what's familiar." So I did. Or I tried, until I saw her. It was between classes. I was cutting through the courtyard, head down, when her laugh caught my attention. Sharp and flirtatious, like a hook. Regina. She was standing way too close to Atlas, with her manicured hand resting lightly on his forearm. Her body angled toward his, her glossy hair catching the sunlight like she knew she looked perfect. And Atlas, he wasn't exactly pulling away. They were speaking quietly. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Her touch said everything. My wolf lunged to the surface so fast I gasped. My vision sharpened, tunneled, and all I could see was her hand on his arm. My body tensed, heat surged through me, not embarrassment or insecurity, but rage. Possessive, irrational rage. She was touching my mate. I felt it build inside me like pressure behind my ribs. My lips curled back. A low growl vibrated in my chest before I could stop it. Regina turned. She'd heard it. My eyes snapped to Atlas's, and the moment they met, his expression changed. Calm turned to alarm in an instant. He stepped away from Regina like he'd been burned, moving toward me in quick, purposeful strides. "Eliana," he said under his breath. "Walk with me." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. My hands were trembling. My nails, my claws, were beginning to push through. He slipped an arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the building. "Come on, let's talk. You need feedback on your essay, right?" I didn't trust myself to speak, but I nodded. Once inside, he took a sharp turn down the staff hallway and opened the door to his office. The moment it closed behind us, I exploded. "What the hell was that?" I hissed, spinning to face him. "She was all over you." Atlas leaned against the door, his expression calm but guarded. "Regina works under my department. That wasn't anything. She touched you." His brow furrowed. And? My voice dropped to a snarl. "She touched what's mine." The words were out before I could stop them. The wolf surged again, wild and impulsive. I crossed the room in 2 steps, fisting the front of his shirt and dragging him down to me. The kiss was not soft, not like the ones in the cabin. This one was claiming, angry, needy. My teeth grazed his lower lip, not enough to draw blood, but enough to make him growl. His hands gripped my waist, slamming me back against the bookshelf as his mouth crashed into mine again, hungrier this time. My claws tore through his shirt, ripping fabric like paper. I tried, I whispered between kisses. I tried to act normal, but seeing her touch you, something inside me snapped. Atlas leaned his forehead to mine, panting. I am sorry, I shouldn't have allowed that. I wanted to bite her. He growled low in his throat. My eyes widened slightly. I like it, he admitted. That possessive fire in you, the way your wolf wants to mark me, claim me. I stared at him, stunned. My instincts hummed, my claws still pressed against his chest, where his heart thundered beneath my palm. I almost did, I said. Right there in the courtyard. I almost shifted. I couldn't stop it. He reached up and cupped the back of my neck. You have to stop it. You can't lose control in public like that. I stiffened, shame crawling in, but he softened his touch. You're still learning. I get it, but next time we might not get lucky. I looked away. I felt like a monster. You're not. I nearly bit you. Again. His mouth curved. I wouldn't have minded. You're not helping, I muttered, cheeks flushing. He chuckled softly, brushing my hair back behind my ear. You're not broken, Eliana. You're just burning too hot. I feel it too. Every time you walk into a room, I feel like I can't breathe. My heart stuttered. Then why do you keep pulling away? He sighed, leaning back slightly. Because I want your trust more than I want your heat. I froze. Because when we do give in, he said, I want it to be you, not just your wolf. The tension in my body snapped. I took a step back. My shirt was wrinkled, his was half shredded, and my claws had already receded, but the bond between us still blazed. Too hot. Too fast. Too much. I need to go, I whispered. Eliana, but I was already backing toward the door. Don't follow me. And then I ran. Chapter 13, I hadn't meant to come back so soon. But after that scene on campus, the growl, the claws, the heat of Atlas's lips on mine, I couldn't stay in my dorm. The moment the weekend hit, I found myself driving up the snowy road toward the compound again, pulled not just by instinct, but by him. The compound was buried in snow, but it pulsed with life. Kids chased each other through the trees, teenagers sparred near the training fields, and patrols returned from the woods in their fur. It was wild, beautiful, and far more real to me than the campus halls had ever been. And when I stepped out of my car, the cold stung my cheeks, but the warmth of belonging curled deep in my chest. Training with Reese was brutal. He didn't hold back just because I was Atlas's mate. He shoved me to the ground, swept my legs, pinned me. And when I growled at him with a snarl that shook the trees, he only grinned. There she is. My strength surprised even me, my speed too. The moment I stopped thinking like a human, when I let my instincts guide me, my body moved with a fluid, predatory grace I didn't know I had. The others noticed too. Whispers followed my sparring matches. Jax, the flirt with mismatched eyes, gave me a thumbs up after I floored him in 3 seconds flat. Maya, barely older than 16, shadowed me like a younger sister. And even the older wolves, those with scars and stories etched into their faces, started watching me not with skepticism, but with curiosity. Still, not everyone welcomed me. Regina made sure of that. It started with glances, a sideways smirk, a lingering look when I passed by. Then came the comments. She shifted late, can't be that strong. Bet Atlas only wants her because of the bond. Doesn't mean she deserves Luna. She doesn't know anything about our world. She'll embarrass us in front of other packs. I tried to ignore her, I really did. But the wolf in me remembered her hand on his arm. And every time she baited me, that same fire rose, hot, furious, possessive. Ignore her, Myra said one evening, pouring hot tea into mismatched mugs. We were in her cabin, the fire crackling, surrounded by ancient books and old photographs. Regina's never forgiven Atlas for not choosing her. And you being his mate? That's a wound she's not going to let scab over easy. She's making the pack doubt me. No, Myra said firmly, her amber eyes sharp. She's showing them who she really is. You've been earning their respect without even realizing it. I looked into the flames. It doesn't feel that way. It will. Her words were soft, but they landed like iron. I found comfort in the pack's rhythms, the daily patrols, the shared meals in the dining hall, sparring sessions that left me aching and exhilarated, nights spent around the bonfire, stories drifting up with the smoke told the best jokes. Maya braided my hair. Even gruff Reese started calling me half-wolf, like it was some weird badge of honor. But the tension with Regina simmered, waiting, and it boiled over faster than I expected. It happened during a group training session on the southern ridge. The air was sharp, the snow packed down from a dozen pairs of boots. I'd just finished pinning one of the junior betas when Regina stepped forward, arms crossed, voice sweet as poison. "Impressive," she drawled, "for someone who didn't even shift until last week." I rolled my eyes, walking toward the weapons table to grab water. But she wasn't done. "Tell me, Eliana, did Atlas explain what it really means to be Luna? It's not just about sharing a bed and looking pretty." I froze. My fingers curled around the metal flask. The rest of the pack turned. Everyone could feel it, the shift in energy, the tension thick in the air. I turned slowly. "You want to say something, Regina? Say it." Her smile sharpened. "Fine. You don't belong here. You don't know our ways. You weren't raised with our laws. You're not ready to lead us." "And you think you are?" She stepped forward, eyes flashing gold. "I was, until you came along. Now we're supposed to believe you're worthy just because the moon said so?" A growl built in my throat. My wolf surge pacing inside me. "I don't need to prove myself to you," I said. "The pack decides who they follow, not you." She lunged. Just a step, just enough. My wolf rose like wildfire. I shifted partially, just enough to let my canines show, my claws flare out, my voice deepen into a low snarl. "Back. Down." For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then she did. She looked away. And in that moment, I realized they were watching. Riss, Jax, Maya, the young ones, the old ones, all of them. Not for bloodshed, not for dominance, but for leadership. And I hadn't attacked. I hadn't caved. I'd stood my ground. That night, there was a shift in the way they looked at me. Nods of acknowledgement. A shoulder clasp from Riss. Jax offering me the best seat by the fire. And when Atlas returned from a meeting with one of the outer territories and found me there, surrounded by the pack, his expression softened. I stood when he approached, unsure of what to say. Unsure if we were still tangled up in the aftermath of that kiss, of my near shift. But he reached for me first. I heard what happened with Regina. She tried to bait me. I didn't bite. I smirked. "Thank you," he said. I blinked. "For what? For not making me choose between my mate and my enforcer." "I wouldn't have made you choose." "I know," he said. "But I'm the one who owes you a choice. I should have set clearer boundaries with her. I should have told you sooner. I've kept distance, not because I doubt you, but because I'm terrified of losing control around you." My breath caught. "I want you, Eliana," he said softly. "Not just because of the bond, because you see this world, the danger, the beauty, and you're not running." "You didn't exactly give me a chance to," I teased. He smiled. "Fair." We stood there, the fire crackling behind us, the pack murmuring and laughing around us. Then he reached for my hand, interlacing our fingers. "They're starting to see you," he said, "really see you." "And you?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen you since the moment you entered my class." My heart stuttered. "I'm still figuring this out," I admitted. "This bond, this world, I'm scared half the time, but I don't want to walk away." "Then don't." And under the winter stars, his lips found mine, not rushed or desperate this time. Just soft. Sure. The kind of kiss that didn't ask. The kind that promised. Chapter 14. The memories started coming back in fragments. I'd be sitting in chemistry, taking notes on molecular bonds, when suddenly I'd smell pine smoke and hear the echo of children's laughter. Or I'd be walking across campus and catch a whiff of cedar that would transport me to a place I couldn't quite remember. A cabin with carved wooden beams and voices speaking in hushed, urgent tones. At first, I dismissed them as side effects of the transformation, my enhanced wolf senses picking up random scents and weaving them into false memories. But the images were too specific, too consistent. A woman with auburn hair braiding flowers into my hair, a man teaching me to track animal prints in soft earth, the sound of howls rising and falling like a lullaby. Family. Not the Vances, who'd raised me with love and kindness. These were older memories, buried so deep I'd forgotten they existed, and they were becoming harder to ignore. "You're distracted again," Chloe observed as we walked back from our morning lecture. Snow crunched under our boots, and the February air bit at our exposed skin. "More than usual, I mean." "Just thinking," I murmured, pulling my scarf tighter. "About Professor Calloway?" I almost laughed. If only it were that simple. "Among other things." She stopped walking, forcing me to turn. "Liana, I know you're going through something, and I know you're not ready to talk about it. But if you need anything, I mean anything, you know you can call me, right? I swallowed hard, guilt rising. I know, thank you. 3 days later, Atlas left on urgent pack business. Something about a territorial dispute. He kissed me goodbye, promised we'd talk when he got back, and was gone, which left me alone in the house with Regina. I found her in the kitchen the next morning, sipping from a porcelain mug like she owned the place. Silk robe, glossy hair, and a condescending smile. Her gaze drifted over me. Didn't expect to see you here? I live here, sort of. Right. Her smile sharpened. Atlas has always had a soft spot for strays. I ignored her. Do you need something? She tilted her head. I just wonder how long you plan on staying, or if you even know what you're walking into. He hasn't told you about your old pack, has he? About what really happened? My pulse skipped. You ever think it's strange? The council's interest in you? Your name missing from registries? The secrecy? She sipped again. He's protecting you, but he's also protecting us, because whatever you dragged with you, it could get us all killed. I turned away, chest tight. Her parting shot was barely a whisper. If you really cared about him, you'd stop being selfish. That night, I stood outside Atlas's office. My hand hovered on the doorknob. My wolf was pacing. I opened the door. The scent of cedar and leather wrapped around me. Everything was clean, controlled. Maps, files, council letters. But it was the cabinet in the corner that called to me. RZ. Locked. Not for long. The drawer creaked open under my strength. I flipped through until I found it. Eliana. I opened the folder. Photos, a family smiling at a campsite, my mother's auburn hair, my father's warm smile. Me, no older than 3, cheeks round with baby fat. Then, horror, blood, torn tents, frozen limbs, Moonridge Pack massacre. Victor Markov, leader of the rogue wolves, believed responsible, still at large, notes in Atlas's handwriting, surveillance reports, sightings. He'd been hunting Victor for years. He knew. He always knew. Tears blurred the words. My hands trembled. And then, I knew I'd find you here. I turned. Regina stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face smug. You just couldn't help yourself, digging through things you don't understand. I shut the file. This is my family. She stepped forward. And your family is going to get ours killed. Victor is a killer, a powerful alpha. If he finds out you're alive, he won't come alone. And Atlas, he'll throw himself into fire for you and take us with him. Her voice was cold. If you really loved him, you'd walk away. She left. I sat in silence. The photo of my mother, smiling as she braided flowers into my hair, burned into my memory. Grief twisted into something harder. No one else dies because of me. Not Atlas. Not this pack. I replaced the file, locked the drawer, and made my decision. 2 days later, I overheard Atlas and Riss in the kitchen. Confirmed sighting at that club in West Portland, Riss said, 3 nights ago. Known associates. Could be a trap, Atlas replied. We need full surveillance. No risks. Victor, I searched, found the club, bought a ticket. That evening, Atlas saw me dressed to leave. You're going out? Girls' night, I lied. He hesitated. Be careful. Always. I kissed him goodbye. Lunar eclipse pulsed with energy, wolves, vampires, fae. I kept to the edges, watching, waiting. Then I smelled it. Death, old blood, violence. I turned and saw him. Gray hair, expensive suit, cold, pale blue eyes. Recognition flickered. He smiled. Victor Markov had been waiting. This was no coincidence. It was a trap, and I'd walked right into it. Chapter 15. The moment our eyes met across the crowded club, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Victor Markov didn't look like a monster. He looked like someone's accountant. Average height, graying hair, expensive suit that screamed middle management. But those pale blue eyes held depths of cruelty that made my wolf recoil in instinctive terror. And he was smiling at me like he'd just found buried treasure. Run. Every instinct I had screamed the same message, but my feet felt rooted to the floor. The music pounded around us, bodies pressed close in the dim lighting, and none of these people had any idea they were witnessing a predator finally cornering his prey. Victor raised his drink in a mock toast, that cold smile never wavering, then began moving through the crowd toward me. That broke the spell. I turned and pushed through the mass of dancing bodies, heading for what I hoped was a back exit. My enhanced hearing picked up his movement behind me, steady, unhurried, like he knew exactly where this chase would end. The back hallway was dimmer, less crowded, perfect for what he had planned. Well, his voice cut through the muffled music. What do we have here? I spun around, pressing my back against the wall. He stood 20 feet away, blocking my path back to the main club. Behind me, an emergency exit beckoned, but something told me he'd planned for that too. "You smell familiar, little wolf," he said, inhaling deeply. His nostrils flared, and something shifted in his expression. "Very familiar. Old pack scent. Moonridge territory." My blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but you do." He stepped closer, and I caught that scent again. Old blood, violence, death. Been wondering what happened to the last Moonridge pup. Thought I'd killed them all that night. The memories crashed over me without warning, screaming, "Fire!" The smell of smoke and terror as small hands pressed me deeper into a root cellar. "You," I whispered. "Me." His smile widened, showing too many teeth. "Amazing how scent memory works, isn't it? Even after all these years, you remember the night I burned your pack to the ground." I tried to shift, to call on my wolf's strength, but terror had locked my transformation away, just like it had when I was 3. I was trapped in human form, facing the monster who'd murdered my birth family. "But that's not all I smell," Victor continued, circling me now like a predator studying its prey. "There's another scent on you. Powerful, alpha. Someone's marked you as theirs." He inhaled again, and his eyes gleamed with sudden recognition and hunger. "Atlas Calloway," he breathed. "Oh, this is even better than I hoped. The great alpha's mate delivered right into my hands." I remained quiet. The last thing I wanted to do was get Atlas into this mess. "I'm going to tear you apart piece by piece, just like I did your family, and he'll feel every second of it through your bond." His words about tearing me apart like my family hit something deep inside me. Hearing him claim credit for destroying everything I'd once known shattered something in my chest. I launched myself at him with a broken cry, my vision already blurring with tears. The moves Reese had drilled into me felt clumsy and wrong as grief overwhelmed my body. My claws found his cheek, leaving 3 shallow scratches that barely drew blood. I couldn't stop the sobs that tore from my throat with each strike, couldn't control the way my whole body shook. Victor laughed, the sound cutting through my cries. "Is that all you've got? Still just a helpless little girl?" The words cracked me open completely. I didn't remember their faces clearly, couldn't recall their voices, but I remembered the fear, the smell of smoke, the way the world had ended when I was too small to understand why. My strikes became wild and desperate, technique forgotten, as I fought through the tears streaming down my face. I threw everything I had at him, but my movements were sloppy now, hindered by the way my chest heaved with each sob. Victor was faster, stronger, and far more experienced. For every scratch I managed to land, he delivered crushing blows that mixed with the agony already tearing through my heart. His fist connected with my ribs, and I heard something crack. Then his claws found my side, tearing through fabric and flesh. I stumbled, my carefully learned stances forgotten as physical pain merged with the emotional devastation. The training with Reese had given me basics, but I wasn't prepared for Victor's savage brutality or for how completely hearing about my pack's death would break me apart. My legs shook as warm blood soaked through my shirt, my vision blurred by tears I couldn't stop. "You fight just like your father did," Victor sneered, grabbing me by the hair, right before I killed him. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to my knees, knowing I'd lost.
She'd told me she was going out for girls' night, kissed me goodbye like everything was normal. But when I checked her tracker hours later, it showed she'd traveled 2 hours away to Lunar Eclipse. Lunar Eclipse. The club where Reese had confirmed Victor's associates 3 nights ago. The same club I was planning to hit tonight with full surveillance because it could be a trap. Why the hell would she go there? It was 2 hours away, in the middle of nowhere. She didn't even know about our surveillance plans, did she? My blood turned to ice as the implications hit me. She'd lied about girls' night. She'd somehow found out about Lunar Eclipse. And now she was walking straight into Victor's hands. I was already grabbing my keys, running for the door, when Regina appeared in the pack house doorway with a smug expression that made my wolf snarl. "Looking for your precious mate?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Regina." I kept my voice level, but every instinct was screaming danger. "What do you know?" She shrugged, examining her nails with theatrical casualness, just that she seemed so distressed when she left. Poor little thing, finally understanding what her presence means for all of us. The words hit me like a physical blow. What did you tell her? Nothing she didn't need to know. Regina's smile was poison. Just a few hints about how her pack really died, and how being here puts your pack in danger. She's quite the liability, isn't she? The world tilted. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. Eliana's sudden change of mind about the flight, her disappearance, the way Regina was practically glowing with satisfaction. You told her, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You told her about her pack. Someone had to. Regina lifted her chin defiantly. She had a right to know that her being here puts all of us at risk, that her pack's death wasn't just some random tragedy. I moved faster than human eyes could follow, crossing the room in a blur of motion. My hand closed around Regina's throat, not enough to hurt, but enough to make my point crystal clear. What exactly did you tell her? Each word was bitten off, my wolf pushing so close to the surface that my eyes were probably glowing. Regina's smugness faltered, replaced by genuine fear. I just gave her some hints about how her pack really died, about how Victor wants her specifically, and how that puts everyone here in danger. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to make her understand the truth. Fuck. I released her and stepped back, running my hands through my hair. Eliana would be devastated, would feel responsible for putting my pack at risk. And if she was upset, if she was somewhere alone and vulnerable, feeling guilty and isolated, Victor would sense it. He'd find her. Do you have any idea what you've done? I snarled, whirling back to face Regina. I told her the truth. Regina shot back, but her voice was shaking now. She needed to know that her being here puts all of us in danger. You signed her death warrant. The words exploded out of me with enough force to rattle the windows. I want you gone, I said quietly, my voice carrying the full weight of alpha command. Pack your things. Leave the territory. If you're still here when I get back, I'll kill you myself. Atlas, you can't. I'm not asking, Regina. I'm telling you, you're banished, effective immediately. I was already heading for the door, my phone in my hand. And if she dies because of what you did, there won't be anywhere in this world you can hide from me. I was already pulling out my phone, speed dialing Marcus at the Supernatural Bureau. We have a problem, I said the moment he answered. Victor Markov is here, in the city, and he has my mate. Jesus, Atlas, are you sure? Her scent just vanished from the airport. She was supposed to be on a flight to Denver 20 minutes ago. I was already heading for the exit, my wolf demanding action. I'm sending you her last known location. If I don't check in within 2 hours, assume the worst. Wait, we have assets in the city. Let us handle this. No. The word came out as a growl. I'm not waiting for backup while he's got her, but I want your people ready in case I don't make it. I hung up and shifted into hunter mode, following the faint trace of Eliana's scent through the terminal. It led to a parking garage where her trail mixed with something else, something that made my wolf snarl with recognition. I closed my eyes, reaching through the mate bond. At first, there was nothing but distance and confusion. Then, like a whisper in the dark, I felt her terror spike. Club District. She's in the Club District. I commandeered the fastest vehicle in the garage, a motorcycle that would let me weave through traffic, and raced through the city streets. Every second felt like an eternity as I followed the invisible thread connecting me to my mate. Please let the Bureau get my message, I thought desperately. The arbiters operated in dimensional spaces that made normal communication impossible, but Marcus had protocols for emergencies like this. If I didn't make it in time, at least they'd know what happened. The bond led me to a sprawling nightclub complex in the warehouse district. Multiple buildings, multiple exits, hundreds of humans creating a maze of scents and sounds that could hide a dozen supernatural ambushes. Then I felt it. Eliana's pain, sharp and immediate, followed by a wave of terror that nearly brought me to my knees. He's hurting her. I abandoned the motorcycle and shifted on the run, my wolf form tearing through the crowd of humans waiting in line. Someone screamed. Someone else shouted about calling the cops. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was getting to Eliana before Victor finished what he'd started. The bond pulled me through the main club, past confused bouncers and terrified patrons toward the back of the building. In the service corridor, her scent was stronger, mixed with blood and fear and the acrid stench of Victor's malice. Through the mate bond, I felt his claws at her throat and saw red. The fight I went through the wall rather than the door, concrete and steel exploding inward as my shifted form collided with the barrier. Victor had time to look surprised before I was on him, my full alpha power unleashed in a way I'd never allowed before. He dropped Eliana and spun to face me, his own shift completing in a blur of motion. In full wolf form, Victor was massive, bigger than most alphas, with scars crisscrossing his dark fur and yellow eyes that held no sanity. "The great Atlas Calloway," he snarled, his voice distorted by the partial shift. "Come to watch your mate die." I didn't waste breath on words. I launched myself at him, claws extended, going for his throat. He twisted away at the last second, my claws raking across his ribs instead of finding the killing blow. Victor's counterattack was brutal and experienced. His claws found my shoulder, tearing through muscle and scraping bone. Pain flared through me, but it only fed the rage burning in my chest. We crashed into the wall, plaster raining down as we grappled. Victor was strong, vicious, and had decades of experience killing other wolves. But he wasn't prepared for the sheer overwhelming fury of a mated alpha whose mate had been threatened. He managed to get behind me, his arm wrapping around my throat in a chokehold that would have killed a lesser wolf. I drove my elbow back into his ribs, heard bone crack, but his grip didn't loosen. "I'm going to tear her apart," he whispered in my ear, his breath hot against my neck. "Slowly, while you watch." That broke something fundamental in me. I grabbed his arm with both hands and threw my weight forward, using his own momentum to send him flying over my shoulder. He hit the opposite wall hard enough to crack the concrete, but he was already moving, already coming for me again. This time, I was ready. When he lunged, I caught him midair, my claws finding purchase in his chest. We went down together, rolling across the floor in a tangle of claws and fangs and blood. He got his teeth into my arm, biting down until I felt bone grind. I responded by driving my claws into his side, seeking vital organs. The scent of our blood filled the air, along with the sounds of destruction as we demolished the hallway around us. Somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens, human law enforcement responding to the noise. Have to end this. Now. Victor broke away from me, breathing hard, his fur matted with blood. We circled each other like gladiators, both looking for an opening. "You can't protect her forever," he taunted. "I'll find her again, and next time..." I feinted left, then drove right, catching him off guard. My claws found his throat, and this time I didn't hesitate. I tore it out in a spray of arterial blood. Victor Markov died choking on his own blood, his yellow eyes finally going dark. I stood over his body, chest heaving, covered in blood that was mostly his. The rage was still there, would probably always be there when I thought about what he'd tried to do to Eliana. But it was over. Finally over. That's when I looked up and saw the faces. Humans. Dozens of them, drawn by the noise and violence, staring in shock and horror at the scene before them. Some had phones out recording. Others were backing away, screaming. The supernatural world had just been exposed in the most public way possible. "Well," a cultured voice said from behind me, rich with Italian accent, "what a magnificent disaster." I spun around, still partially shifted, blood dripping from my claws, and found myself facing two figures who hadn't been there moments before. They materialized from shadows that bent reality around them, stepping through dimensional rifts like walking through doorways. Lords, not their agents, the actual lords themselves. My blood turned to ice. The man was handsome in an otherworldly way, with sharp Mediterranean features, olive skin, and dark hair that caught light like black silk. His suit was perfectly tailored, probably cost more than most people's cars, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known defeat. When he smiled, it was pure Italian charm, wrapped around something ancient and deadly. "Lord Salvatore," I managed, recognizing him from the few times our paths had crossed in official capacity. "Atlas Calloway," he purred, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "You've created quite the spectacle." The saw woman beside him, and I immediately understood why men had started wars over faces like hers. "Lady Morwen," I said, my voice hoarse. "Darling," she replied, her British accent crisp and refined, tinged with aristocratic disdain. You've made such a frightful mess." She surveyed the destruction with the same expression someone might use to examine a particularly offensive piece of art. "Though I must say your technique was rather enthusiastic." Lady Morwen was already moving among the humans, her voice weaving through the air like the most beautiful music ever composed. "Sleep, my dears," she murmured, and one by one the witnesses collapsed into peaceful unconsciousness. Dream of a gas leak, an explosion, emergency evacuations. Nothing supernatural here, just terribly boring human incompetence. I watched in fascination and growing dread as she rewrote reality for dozens of people in a matter of minutes. The destruction around us began to fade, replaced by the illusion of a simple structural failure. Victor's body dissolved into shadow and was gone, as if he'd never existed at all. Lord Salvatore examined his manicured nails with apparent boredom. "Bene, bene," he murmured. "The mortals will wake believing they witnessed nothing more exciting than a building collapse. How terribly mundane." When Lady Morwen was finished, she turned to me with those ancient violet eyes. "Memory work is frightfully exhausting," she said with the tone of someone discussing the weather. "I do hope we won't need to repeat this performance. It would be such a bore." "The exposure has been contained," Lord Salvatore announced, straightening his tie. "But naturalmente, there are consequences for such theatrical behavior." "I was protecting my mate," Lady Morwen laughed, a sound like crystal bells that somehow managed to be both beautiful and mocking. "Oh, how deliciously romantic, the big bad alpha protecting his little wolf." She examined her perfectly manicured nails with apparent interest. "How very pedestrian." Lord Salvatore clicked his tongue softly, a sound that carried more menace than most people's threats. "What a pity. All this violence over love." He stepped closer, and I felt the weight of his power pressing against my mind like a physical force. "Do you know what you've done, boy?" Rage flared in my chest, but I forced it down. These weren't opponents I could fight. The lords were beings whose power made alpha wolves look like house cats, creatures who had existed since before human civilization and ruled from dimensional realms that existed between heartbeats. "What do you want?" I asked. Finally, an intelligent question. Lord Salvatore's smile was sharp as a blade. "You're coming with us, Caro. The other lords wish to discuss your passionate display." "For how long?" "That depends entirely on how cooperative you prove to be," Lady Morwen interjected, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who had never been denied anything. "And how entertaining we find your company." I looked at Eliana, still unconscious against the wall where I'd placed her after the fight. Blood matted her hair and claw marks decorated her throat. She needed medical attention, needed to be somewhere safe. She needs to learn discretion," Lady Morwen interrupted with a wave of her hand. "As do you, darling. Really, causing such a scene in public. How frightfully gauche." Lord Salvatore gestured, and reality seemed to bend around us like heated glass. The dimensional rift opened with a sound like tearing silk, revealing glimpses of a realm where physics were merely suggestions and time flowed like honey. "Come," he said with deadly courtesy. "Other lords are waiting, and they despise being kept waiting almost as much as they despise being surprised." The last thing I saw before we vanished was Reese bursting through the club's front entrance, his eyes wide with panic as he searched for us.
I woke up to chaos. The club was back to normal, music pounding, people dancing, no sign that a supernatural fight to the death had just taken place in the back hallway. But my shoulder throbbed where Victor's claws had caught me, and the taste of blood lingered in my mouth. "Atlas?" I called out, struggling to my feet. The hallway was empty except for some scattered debris that could have been from anything. "Liana?" Reese appeared at the end of the corridor, his face grim. "Thank God, are you hurt?" "Where is he? Where's Atlas?" Reese's expression darkened. "Gone." "What do you mean gone?" "Exactly what I said. 1 minute this place was a war zone, the next..." He gestured at the normal club scene around us. Everything was back to normal and Atlas was nowhere to be found. Panic clawed at my chest. Through our bond, I felt nothing. Not pain, not fear, just an awful emptiness where Atlas should have been. That's impossible. He was here. He killed Victor. Victor's gone too, along with any evidence that supernatural anything happened in this place. But the witnesses... What witnesses? A new voice interrupted, smooth and musical, with that unmistakable aristocratic British accent. I turned to see a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, the kind of beauty that had started wars and toppled kingdoms. Platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her gown seemed to be woven from starlight itself. But it was her eyes, violet as twilight and older than civilizations, that made my wolf want to submit and flee simultaneously. "Who are you?" I demanded. "Lady Morwen," she said with a smile that was all sharp edges and old money elegance. "And you, darling, are going to stay very quiet about tonight's little theatrical performance. Where is Atlas?" "Gone." Her voice carried an authority that made my bones ache, each word precisely enunciated with the kind of upper-class diction that could cut glass. "And if you value his continued existence, which I'm sure you do, being so romantically attached, you will not speak of what happened here to anyone." "You can't just—" "Oh, but I can." Lady Morwen's laugh was like crystal bells, beautiful and sharp enough to draw blood. "I just finished erasing the memories of 47 humans. Rather tedious work, actually. I would prefer not to do it again, but if you force my hand—" She examined her perfectly manicured nails with the same attention someone might give a piece of fine art. "Well, let's just say memory work becomes so much more creative when one is properly motivated." The threat hung in the air like a blade. I felt the power radiating from her, ancient and terrifying and utterly casual in its cruelty. Whatever she was, she could unmake me with a thought and consider it barely worth the effort. "Good girl," she murmured when I stayed silent, her tone the same one someone might use to praise a well-trained pet. "Atlas will be returned when the lords are satisfied with his cooperation. Until then, do try not to do anything foolish. It would be such a waste of a perfectly lovely face." And then she was gone, like she'd never been there at all. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mate missing, my questions unanswered, and the taste of supernatural politics bitter on my tongue. "We need to go," Reese said quietly, taking my arm. "Now." "But Atlas is tougher than you think. He'll be okay." Reese's voice was steady, but I caught the worry in his scent. "Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe and figure out what the hell just happened." He practically dragged me through the club, past oblivious humans who had no memory of the violence that had just unfolded. By the time we reached his truck, I was shaking. From shock, from pain, from the terrifying realization that there were powers in this world that could make even an alpha disappear. "Who were they?" I asked as Reese started the engine. "Trouble," he said grimly. "The kind of trouble that makes our pack disputes look like playground arguments." As we drove away from the club, I pressed my hand to my chest, where the bond with Atlas should have been warm and strong. Instead, there was only cold emptiness and the growing certainty that I'd just lost the most important person in my world to forces I didn't understand. And worst of all, I had no idea how to get him back. Chapter 16. 3 days. 3 endless days of searching, howling, and feeling like I was slowly going insane. The mate bond that had once been a warm, constant presence in my chest was now nothing but a distant ache, like trying to remember a dream after waking. After Riss had gotten me back to pack territory that first night, he'd sat me down and explained what little he knew about the Lords. 7 beings of unimaginable power who governed the supernatural world from the shadows, each with their own domain and terrible authority. He described them in hushed tones: Salvatore, the Lord of Justice and Truth; Morwen, the Lady of Secrecy and Influence; Volkov, the Lord of Power and Order; and 4 others whose names alone carried weight in the supernatural world. "They're not evil," Riss had said, his voice careful, "but they're not human either. They operate on a scale we can barely comprehend. Pack politics, territorial disputes, even alpha challenges, it's all just noise to them. They only intervene when something threatens the fundamental balance." "Like Atlas killing Victor in public," I'd whispered. "Like Atlas killing Victor in public," he'd agreed grimly. The knowledge hadn't made the waiting any easier. If anything, it had made it worse, knowing that Atlas was being judged by beings whose power made alpha wolves look like house cats. I'd torn through the pack territory anyway, following every scent trail, checking every possible hiding place. I'd howled until my throat was raw, called his name and until my voice gave out. But Atlas was gone, vanished as completely as if he'd never existed at all. The rage that had sustained me for the first 2 days was beginning to crack, revealing the desperate grief beneath. I'd cursed those mysterious lords so many times that even my wolf was tired of the litany. Salvatore. The name burned in my mind like acid, the bastard who'd taken my mate. Tonight something drew me back to the moonlit clearing where I'd first shifted. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was desperation, but I felt an undeniable pull toward that sacred space. The moon was full overhead, casting silver light through the trees, and for the first time in days, I felt watched. Not threatened, just observed. I stood in the center of the clearing, my fists clenched at my sides, and screamed into the night. "Where is he? What did you do with him, you cowards? Come face me." Such passion. The voice came from behind me, soft, cultured, with just a hint of Italian accent threading through the words like silk. I spun around, my heart hammering, and found myself facing a man who seemed to have materialized from the shadows themselves. He was devastatingly handsome in the way that screamed danger, sharp Mediterranean features, olive skin, and dark hair that caught the moonlight. His suit was perfectly tailored, probably cost more than most people's cars, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known defeat. But it was his eyes that made my wolf recoil, dark as polished obsidian, ancient and weighted with the memory of countless judgments. This wasn't just any supernatural being, this was something far older, far more dangerous. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, making the air itself feel heavy. "You," I breathed, recognition hitting me like a physical blow. "You're him, Salvatore." He tilted his head slightly, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Lord Salvatore." My wolf surged forward, ready to attack, but I forced her back. Still, I couldn't help myself. "Yeah? Well, I don't give a damn what your title is. Where's my mate, you pretentious asshole?" Something flickered in those ancient eyes. Surprise, maybe even amusement. Interesting. What's interesting is that you think you can just waltz in here looking like some mafia boss reject and expect me to what, bow? Curtsy? I've got news for you, Lord Fancy Pants. I don't do the whole submission thing. Now he did smile, just a slight curve of his lips that somehow made him look even more dangerous. "I can see that." "Good. Now where the hell is Atlas? And don't you dare give me some cryptic bullshit answer about the greater good or whatever. I want straight answers." "He's safe," Salvatore said simply, his voice still soft but carrying an undertone that made my bones vibrate. "Being questioned." "It's been 3 days? Has it?" He stepped closer, and I had to fight not to take a step back. The power rolling off him was suffocating. "Time moves differently in the Nexus. For your mate, it has been perhaps an hour." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process this. "That's impossible." "Many things are impossible." He began to circle me slowly, and I turned to keep him in sight. "Tell me, little wolf, what did you think would happen when your mate slaughtered another supernatural in front of dozens of mortal witnesses?" "He was protecting me," I snarled. "Victor was going to kill me." Victor's death was not unexpected. It was the manner of his death that proved problematic. The casual way he said it, like Atlas was just another case file, made my rage spike. "You had no right. We had every right." His voice remained soft, but something shifted in his presence, a weight that made my knees want to buckle. "We are the arbiters of balance. Your mate created a significant ripple. It was our duty to address it." "Let me see him," I demanded, taking a step forward despite every instinct screaming at me to run. "I want to see that he's safe." Lord Salvatore stopped circling and faced me directly. For a long moment, he simply studied me with those ancient eyes, and I felt like he was seeing straight through to my soul. "You are not what I expected," he murmured. "What, did you expect me to grovel? Sorry to disappoint, but I don't do the whole trembling maiden thing. I want my mate back, and if you don't give him to me, I'm going to kick your ass." He blinked once, slowly, and then, to my complete shock, he chuckled. It was a low, rich sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "You're going to kick my ass." "That's right. I don't care how old you are or how many fancy titles you have. Nobody messes with my mate." "I have existed since before your ancestors learned to hunt in packs," he said, still with that ghost of a smile. "I have judged gods and monsters, toppled kingdoms, and raised others from ashes, and you stand before me threatening violence. Are you mocking me?" "No." His expression shifted, becoming something almost fond. I am impressed. Do you know how long it has been since someone showed such authenticity in my presence? I blinked, thrown off balance by the unexpected praise. I what? Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. For just a moment his perfect composure cracked, and I saw something raw and painful flash across his features. You wish to see your mate? He asked, gesturing with one elegant hand. The air shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Suddenly, I was seeing another vision. Atlas sitting at a massive table, looking remarkably calm considering the circumstances. Across from him sat the platinum-blonde woman I recognized from the club, Lady Morwen, her violet eyes fixed on my mate with polite interest. Around the table sat 3 other men, each devastatingly handsome in their own way, each radiating the same ancient power. He's safe, I breathed. Indeed, being educated rather than punished. The vision faded, leaving me staring at Lord Salvatore with new questions burning in my throat. Why are you showing me this? Because I had something important to do, and your relentless cursing for the past hour made it quite difficult to focus. What? I said, blinking in surprise. His smile was enigmatic. We will see each other again, cara mia. Of this I am certain, but for now... He paused, wincing slightly. Might I request that you cease your creative cursing of my name? It's rather loud in the dimensional frequencies. I blinked again, thrown off balance by the unexpected complaint. You can hear that? When someone speaks a lord's name with such passion, it tends to echo across the realms. You have been quite vocal in your opinions of me. Heat flooded my cheeks. I was worried, I know. His expression softened again, but perhaps in the future you could express your displeasure more quietly? Before I could respond, he stepped back and reality seemed to bend around him. Arrivederci, Piccola. And then he was gone, vanished as completely as if he'd never been there at all. I stood alone in the clearing for perhaps 30 seconds, my mind still reeling from the encounter, when the air shimmered again. This time, Atlas materialized in front of me, solid, real, standing in the clearing, looking dazed and confused. Eliana? He said, his voice rough with disbelief. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I launched myself at him, crashing into his arms with enough force to knock a lesser man off his feet. He caught me easily, his strong arms wrapping around me like a fortress, and I buried my face in his neck, breathing in his familiar scent. I thought I'd lost you, I whispered against his skin. Never, he murmured, his hands tangling in my hair. Never, my love. I'm here. I'm safe. We held each other in the moonlight, and for the first time in 3 days, the world felt right again. The mate bond hummed back to life, warm and strong and perfect, filling the empty space in my chest. When we finally pulled apart, I looked around the clearing where Lord Salvatore had been. Only the faint scent of lightning and old paper remained, along with the memory of those ancient, knowing eyes. What happened? I asked, cupping Atlas's face in my hands. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I'm fine, he said, though his eyes were troubled. It was strange, like being in a dream. I remember being questioned, being shown visions of what could happen if the supernatural world was exposed. They made me understand the consequences of what I did. Do you regret it? No. His answer was immediate and fierce. I'll never regret protecting you, but I understand now why it concerned them. There are bigger things at stake than just our pack, our territory. I nodded, thinking of Lord Salvatore's words and that flash of pain in his eyes. I think our quiet life just got a lot more complicated. Good thing we have each other then, Atlas said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Good thing, I agreed, leaning into his warmth. As we walked back toward the pack house, hand in hand under the moonlight, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The supernatural world was vast and dangerous, full of lords and powers that could reshape reality with a thought. But whatever came next, we would face it together. By the way, Atlas said as we reached the edge of the clearing, remind me to never get on the bad side of a lord again. That was intense.
Final chapter. The transition back to our realm was like surfacing from deep water, sudden, disorienting, and filled with the overwhelming relief of drawing breath again. One moment I was sitting in that marble chamber with the 5 lords, discussing the delicate balance of supernatural secrecy, and the next I was standing in our moonlit clearing, blinking in confusion as reality reasserted itself around me. The questioning had felt like hours, maybe 2 at most, Lord Salvatore had been surprisingly reasonable, explaining rather than condemning, showing me visions of what could happen if the supernatural world was exposed. The other lords had been equally measured in their approach. Morwen with her violet eyes and knowing smiles, Volkov with his stern but fair demeanor. They'd made me understand the weight of my actions, the ripple effects that could have torn through the carefully maintained veil between worlds. As we walked back toward the pack house, her hand gripping mine like a lifeline, I couldn't shake the memory of that moment in the club. Victor's face, twisted with predatory hunger as he'd cornered my mate. The way Eliana had looked at me across the crowded room, not with fear, but with absolute trust that I would protect her. I'd already been planning his death before I'd even reached them. The execution had been decided the moment I'd seen his hand on her arm, smelled the sick satisfaction rolling off him in waves. Victor had been a stain on the supernatural world for decades, and someone needed to remove him. The problem was, I'd let my rage make it messy. I could have killed him quietly, discreetly, in any number of ways that wouldn't have exposed our world to mortal eyes. But seeing him so close to Eliana, seeing the hunger in his eyes as he'd prepared to hurt her, I'd wanted him to suffer. I'd wanted everyone to see what happened to those who threatened what was mine. You have quite the spirited mate, Alpha. The voice whispered through my mind like silk over steel, and I nearly stumbled. Lord Salvatore's mental touch was unmistakable, ancient, powerful, and tinged with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. She threatened to kick my ass, the Lord continued, and I could practically hear the smile in his voice. Repeatedly, called me a pretentious asshole and Lord Fancy Pants. Quite creative, really. Despite everything, I found myself chuckling. The sound escaped before I could stop it, and Eliana immediately turned to look at me with narrowed eyes. "What's funny?" she demanded, her voice sharp with irritation. "I would suggest learning to manage that temper of hers," Lord Salvatore's voice continued in my head, though I admit it's rather refreshing. Most beings spend so much time groveling they forget to show their true selves. The chuckle turned into a full laugh, and Eliana's expression darkened further. "Atlas, I swear to God, if you're laughing at me after disappearing for 3 days and scaring me half to death." 3 days? I stopped walking, staring at her in shock. "Eliana, it's only been a few hours. The Lord said time moves differently in the Nexus, but I didn't realize." 3 days. She punctuated each word with a sharp poke to my chest. 3 days of not knowing if you were dead or alive. 3 days of searching every inch of pack territory. 3 days of cursing that smug bastard's name until even my wolf was sick of it. The pain in her voice hit me like a physical blow. 3 days. She'd lived through 3 days of hell while I'd been gone for what felt like a pleasant afternoon. The guilt crashed over me in waves. "Eliana, I'm so sorry, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you left me." The words exploded out of her. 3 days of worry and rage and terror finally finding their target. "You made that choice in the club, and then you were just gone. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing." She is magnificent when she's angry. Lord Salvatore's voice whispered through my mind, tinged with genuine admiration. "You are a fortunate man, Alpha, or on second thought maybe not, to have to deal with that for life. I don't think I want that." I couldn't help but smile at that, and Eliana's eyes flashed dangerously. "Are you seriously smiling right now? I'm trying to be mad at you." "I know," I said, reaching out to cup her face in my hands. "And you have every right to be. But God, Eliana, I love you. I love your fire, your strength, your absolutely terrifying lack of self-preservation when it comes to protecting the people you care about." "I'm not done being angry," she said, but I could see the fight starting to leave her eyes. "I know, and I'm not done apologizing, but right now, I just need to kiss you." Before she could protest, I leaned down and captured her lips with mine. She resisted for exactly 2 seconds before melting into me, her hands fisting in my shirt as she kissed me back with 3 days' worth of fear and relief and desperate love. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, the mate bond singing between us like a struck bell. "I'm still mad," she whispered against my lips. "I know. And I'm still going to yell at you when we reach home. I'm counting on it. And I still think Lord Salvatore is a pretentious asshole." I heard that, came the amused voice in my head, though it was already fading as the Lord's attention turned elsewhere. I chuckled again, and this time Eliana just shook her head and pulled me toward home. "Come on," she said, her voice still rough with emotion. "Let's go home. We have a lot to talk about, and I have 3 days worth of worry to work through." "Together?" I asked, lacing our fingers together. "Together," she agreed. And Atlas, Lord Salvatore's voice whispered one last time through my mind, "Do try to keep your mate from threatening any more lords. My colleagues are not as understanding as I am." I grinned and squeezed Eliana's hand. "I'll do my best," I murmured, knowing she'd never change. And honestly, I wouldn't want her to.
And that brings us to the end of Atlas and Eliana's story, at least for now. This is Vivienne Solis signing off, and I'll be back Friday with another tale to share. Until then, keep your hearts open to the magic that surrounds us, and remember, sometimes the best love stories are the ones that make us a little bit dangerous. See you next time.